Hello? Captain? Captain, are you there?
Oh, lad, I've had a terrible time. The sharks have taken my arms, and the seagulls have picked my legs to bone. I've got no reason to go on, lad. I'm but a sandbag now. Throw me overboard into the drink. I'll drift the seas like a forgotten crisp packet.
Oh, but Captain, have you not heard? The Lookout Sir podcast. It's still going. They're creating content every week.
There's nothing new about that, lad.
But Captain, that's just it. Dan and Phil, they've both got beards.
Beards? I feel a change in the wind. Quick, lad, grab that rope, throw it around me. I may have no arms or legs, but I can still be the flag for this very vessel.
But Captain, where are we going?
You know where, lad. The Lookout Sir podcast.
Oh my God!
All aboard the good ship Lookout Sir. Hello everybody, it's me, Dan. I'm doing that bit at the start where I introduced the show. Welcome to episode 172 of the Warhammer podcast, known as the Lookout Sir. I should say Warhammer 40,000 podcast, but I'm torn because we do talk about a lot of Age of Sigmar this time around. Because it's like, a 2024 prediction show, essentially. But before we get into all of that, how are we doing, Phil? How are you, mate?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, all aboard. Am I the captain of a ship, or am I the deckhand? Being whipped mercilessly by Captain Dan.
I think we know that, if there was ever a set of circumstances that led us into some form of nautical adventure upon the seven seas of, the fun that represents, I think you would definitely occupy that captain role. You're a more vicious man than me, Phil. You've got less empathy, more suited for the rigours of command.
I mean, I was going to say I've got the bigger beard, and that is why I'm suited for command of a nautical vessel. And that's the only reason. It's not because I'm a cruel master and, have no empathy, apparently. Thanks.
Does it concern you, Phil, now that I'm encroaching on your gimmick by having decided to allow myself to grow a beard for the first time ever?
I know, yes. You're slowly catching up, because I'm sort of at max capacity of my size, so eventually you could get there and we could be big, beardy twins together.
I don't really ever aspire to going to that level, though. I don't think that's really what I'm looking for. I'm probably going to go to the barber's tomorrow and get it cleaned up a bit and sort of keep it. I don't really want to go much more than where I'm at, really. I think this is probably enough, I don't want to turn into... But then who knows, I mean, I remember you having much more kind of, smaller beards once upon a time, and then over the years you've just encroached in this sort of, ticket collector...
vibe, yeah. So that's true.
Yeah, ticket conductor. Sorry, that's the term, isn't it?
I mean, I can't say a ticket conductor has naturally got a big beard, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, fair. They're more sideburns, aren't they?
That's true. With that distraction out of the way, on this week's episode, we are talking, as Dan has already said, 2024 predictions for both Warhammer 40k and Age of Sigmar, because we do that now. Obviously, the LVO has happened. There's been loads of reveals. We'll talk about that in the next episode. We just didn't have time this time round. So, something for another day.
Exactly. We're working up towards going to Warhammer World this weekend, so time was not on our side. But what is on our side is the 5-star review.
Come on now, Timmy. You've got your orders. You've got to do it.
But I don't want to, sir.
You've got your orders. Now get up there, get over that trench, and get me that 5-star review, and get it back here right away.
Okay, sir.
Noting, as always, it's an entirely pointless gesture. But Phil, if you were to guess, and I'm asking you to do so, where might this week's 5-star review come from?
I think Apple Podcasts of America.
I'm afraid not, Phil. I'm afraid not. This week's 5-star review comes from Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. We do well, Phil, in the Britons. Yes.
A classic.
Yes, we do. It is the classic, the greatest of 5-star reviews by all accounts. And it reads, top podcast, 5 stars. And it comes via an individual called Shawams. I don't necessarily know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Shawams, which I am going to pronounce as Shawams. What would you maybe guess that could be, Phil?
God, I mean, I don't know at all. I'll happily go with whatever you go with.
So we're going to go with Shawams. All right. That's how it's going to be. So, Shawams. That's what it is. So Shawams has left us a 5-star review, which is, of course, a prerequisite of appearing here in the 5-star review segment. And if you would like to leave us a 5-star review, we encourage you to do so and are doing so now. So get on the internet and leave us those 5-star reviews because they massively help us out. Ultimately, by virtue of this incredibly tedious segment, we have probably inflated our figures to the point that in accordance to a very well SEO'd, podcast chart, we're now the number 2 Warhammer podcast on the internet. Isn't that exciting, Phil?
Ooh.
Indeed. What a time to be alive. Other charts that involve actual download figures and more kind of tactile data may say otherwise, but, I'm going to choose to ignore them in favor of the very specific set of criteria that makes us look better than we are.
Why ever not?
Indeed. Why ever not? Right. Okay. So 5-star review, please consider leaving us a 5-star review because it does help us out. But if you really want to help us out, why not head over to our Patreon where you can support us by throwing us a couple of quid. And in return for that lovely gesture, we will, shout you out at this particular moment. Not you individually. We're not that good. But, you collectively as our lovely patrons, we say thank you to all of you because we do really appreciate it. And we do every now and again get around to doing additional content on our Patreon. I'm currently working on some few bits and pieces at the minute as well, which I hopefully will be releasing on Patreon in February. But yeah, it's just, a really nice way of supporting the podcast. But again, you don't have to do it. It's just nice that people are, but it isn't a requirement. At the end of the day, it's there should you want to support the pod or not. Up to you. Additionally, we do merchandise as well. Check out the links in the description below. And if you fancy getting yourself some Lookout Sir merch, you can find links for that, as I say, below. And that's it, really. All shilling done and accounted for. Let's get back to this 5-star review. So, top podcast, 5 stars. I have been in search of a good 40k podcast for a long time. Can't believe I've not found this one sooner. Having dipped my toes back into 40k with Arcs of Omen, I am so glad that I found this to listen to. Why do I like it? It's because it's no nonsense, easy to follow, but still a deep dive into lore and gameplay. I have a lot to catch up on, 148 episodes to be exact, but looking forward to every minute. Keep up the good work, and let's see what 10th edition has to offer. And that, as I said before, comes from Shawams via Apple Podcasts of Great Britain. We do well, Phil, in the Britons. Thank you so much, Shawams. You are a delight and a scholar, and I appreciate a very well-crafted and sentimental review that you've offered. I feel warm and fuzzy inside. Thank you so much. But to elaborate on that, of course, it could only be Philip.
Well, thank you, Shawams, or however your name is actually pronounced. Appreciate the kind gesture of the 5-star review, as everyone does. Glad you're getting back into the hobby, although this was about a year old now. Glad you are, enjoying, I assume, 40k and Arcs of Omen, as it then was, and hopefully our Arcs of Omen lore chats, where I vaguely recount to Dan the books of the Arc of Omen via my slightly dreamy haze of having read them just prior to falling to sleep every night for a couple of months and making some notes down. That's how I basically went through the Arcs of Omen. Hopefully you enjoy 10th edition. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. And also, well done for willing to brave the back catalogue of over 140 episodes an impressive feat indeed, because that is a lot of content. It's probably months of your life wasted listening to us, probably while doing something else, so it's not so bad. But yeah, thanks very much. I appreciate it. And enjoy your day, wherever you may be.
Indeed. Thank you so much. And again, obviously, massive thank you to everyone who has left us a 5-star review, and obviously you for just listening. Really appreciate it. And to show us our appreciation, we're going to get on with episode 172. Thanks very much, everyone. Core blimey, everybody. If it isn't 2024 already, what a time to be alive, Phil. Would you ever have imagined you would have lived so long?
Yes. Judging by the fact that this is actually our second 2024 episode, it's no surprise to anyone that it is 2024.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I'm glad that if it weren't for us producing a fortnightly pod, you wouldn't have, the awareness of the year and or its impact on yourself.
I wouldn't have otherwise, because it goes so quickly.
No. It does. It does. All timey-wimey. But yeah, look, 2024 hopefully, potentially could be an exciting year in the world of Warhammer. Games Workshop are going from strength to strength in some opinions, weakness to weakness, says some others maybe. But the point is that they've got lots of things going on, lots of systems that are still very active. We've got, obviously, Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer the Age of Sigmar, Warhammer the Horus Heresy, Warhammer the Old World, Warcry, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, Horus Heresy, Adeptus Titanicus, not Adeptus Titanicus, Legion Imperialis, that's the word, isn't it?
Adeptus Titanicus is still vaguely supported, technically, as is Aeronautica, apparently, but that sort of disappeared from the web store for now, but I'm sure it'll be relaunched as a Horus Heresy-only version at some point.
And the Middle-earth thing, whatever that's called, the Middle-earth.
Yes, Middle-earth. Or The Hobbit.
Is it just Middle-earth? Is it not Battles for Middle-earth?
Yeah, probably Battles for Middle-earth. Yeah, although I think The Hobbit is the main tagline it now goes by, isn't it?
Yeah,
or is all-encompassing?
Underworlds as well. Underworlds, don't forget Underworlds.
Yes, that is a thing. Did we do Kill Team? I assume you did.
I think we covered Underworlds. Well, we didn't cover Underworlds, but we just did. What was the one you said?
Kill Team.
Oh, Kill Team! Flipping heck. So many games, it is difficult to remember. And we're not going to talk about all the games, although we will talk about some of them. I think with things being the way they are, it's very clear that GW have a lot of different things happening. And, we want to kind of focus on, I guess, what we would consider the core systems, which is really Warhammer 40,000 and Warhammer Age of Sigmar. It is fair to say that we probably would talk a little bit about Old World as well, because there's speculation around what's going on with that. Although, to be honest with you, it's all relatively evident at this point. It's just come out, and now they're going to proceed to release army books. And then, Heresy, I guess, is an interesting one as well. But it only seems right. What's that?
Sigmar. Age of Sigmar.
I said Age of Sigmar. I said the main systems, Warhammer 40,000 and Sigmar.
Oh, okay, sorry. I clearly, my brain just switched off.
It's all right, mate. It's all right. For those who are listening to this as an edited podcast, they shan't notice our, foibles, nor will they appreciate the strange delayed web connection that we're working with at the moment.
Fair enough.
Indeed. It all comes out clean in the edit. But yeah, Warhammer 40,000 really feels like the place to start. Lots of changes likely happening in the immediate sense. So myself and Phil are recording this on Wednesday, the 17th of January, the Wednesday before the LVO. So there will be LVO reveals, which we will be talking about in this podcast. And there will quite possibly be, following the LVO or shortly after, new balanced data slate update thingies to try and deal with some of the more egregious parts of the games to play system. Obviously, we know Dark Angels are on the horizon as well, and that's going to bring in a whole lot of new options for what is obviously an incredibly popular faction in Space Marines. So, these are the things we kind of understand and know in the immediate sense, but we want to kind of talk more about, Warhammer 40,000 as it is this year, and what that kind of represents, I suppose. So, Phil, for you, 2024 Warhammer 40,000, how would you, I suppose, describe going into the year, your relationship with the game presently? What are the things you're most looking forward to? And I suppose, what are the things you are hopeful for? Answered in any order with any amount of, flabby extra conversation in between.
Oh, a big question. I'll try and do it justice. So let's start off with I'll briefly talk about the projects I'm working on because that relates to the stuff I'm excited for. This year, I'm going to No Retreat. I'm building my Thunder Warriors, which are Custodes counts as. That is my project, basically, for the entire year. I've got to build and convert up another 1,000 points worth of minis, and I've got to paint 2,000 points worth of minis, which is a big job for me if anyone knows how slow I do stuff. So that's my main focus for the year. So quite blinkered as much as possible without trying to be distracted by other systems like the old world. So the thing I'm excited for the most, I guess, is, I say the most present. The most pressing thing I'm excited to see is the Custodes Codex and what new miniatures they might be getting for 40k, because that will impact potentially my army list that I'm aiming to build, and also what units I could potentially build in that remaining 1,000 points I've got. So that's something I'm particularly looking forward to. Have you got any thoughts on that, Dan, before I go into the other points?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, I suppose, in the sense that, obviously there is a Custodes book coming through. We do know that. That is one of the books that is confirmed.
Yes, yeah. It's I think spring, which, as we talked about, is basically this part of the year, even though it's technically winter.
I mean, it's not technically winter; it is winter.
Well, yes, but I mean, in terms of how Games Workshop do it, they do spring.
How Games Workshop incorrectly interpret the season.
Yes, although fun fact, I was speaking to my dear wife about this topic after that last episode where we was talking about it, and I was explaining how Games Workshop gets it wrong, because she also works in publishing, and she was actually saying that actually that's the best of the worst options. Because we were saying Q1, Q2 makes more sense. However, for a lot of people, especially in the business world, Q1, Q2 works out as financial quarters rather than sort of quarters of the year. So that's actually quite quite ambiguous as to when that is. So they realise that spring isn't the most accurate term for the first few months of January, February, March, but actually is the one that's most likely to accurately get across to the average person. Not say it, people that don't get it are dumb or anything. Just, the average common person that's going to be buying stuff. If you say spring 24, they know they mean Jan, Feb, March, even though that's not actually spring. So that was an interesting little side tangent. So from the horse's mouth, someone who works in publishing, that they were like, yeah, that's kind of the best thing to do. So we've given Games Workshop stick, perhaps inaccurately on that one.
Well, spring is late March to late June.
It is, I know. But I think the other logic is, if you were to say winter 24, do you mean Jan, Feb, or do you mean December? That would also be the other confusing thing.
Well, you could mean December, you could mean January, you could mean February, or you could mean early to mid March.
Exactly. That's the thing you don't know.
That's the ambiguity.
But regardless of that tangent, they've announced that the Custodes Codex is coming out in the next month or two, basically.
Exactly. So Custodes are coming through. The only reason that's interesting, I was going to say, because I actually was going to pose the question to you, because Games Workshop have put an article out about Dark Angels, Deathwing armies, and they have published the points for that army, and it does seem like they're on the higher end. So, 10 of your finest, or 5 of your finest Deathwing Knights, the new Deathwing Knights, will set you back a handsome, I think it was 290 points for that squad. So 5 minis at 290. That's more expensive than Custodes, Phil. You could retool.
Yeah, it counts as something else, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe if I need to.
Mate, I mean, this is the thing, right? Like, if you counted them as Deathwing, a 2,000 point Deathwing army can literally be about 36 models or something.
That's true. Yeah, I guess the downside is I do have a mixture of regular guys and Terminators. Whereas you're saying count them all as Terminators, which would be a bit confusing. And probably the weapon loadouts are all wrong, I imagine, as well.
Well, you could do the Terminators as Deathwing Knights, and then the regular ones as just Deathwing Terminators.
That is true, actually. Yeah, possible. Well, I'll consider it if it's needed. But yeah, looking forward to
If I need to shave off 5 or 6 minis, it's the way forwards, yeah.
So yeah, looking forward to seeing what that will do, because that will probably steer my project for the rest of the year. So that's kind of important. Obviously, points will be helpful and useful for that as well, to fine tune my final list in terms of what I need to build. How I'm feeling about the game. Yeah, so that's a bit more of a complicated answer, I guess. Like, I'm still in the it's fine category. I'm not sold on it being a great addition. I still feel like there was lots of changes that got made that weren't really needed, I don't think. I still stand by the fact that, you know, I was actually quite happy to play Ninth for another year, even though it was complicated. Because I feel like the core rules were good. It was the army books that, if anything, needed to be toned down in complexity. And instead they were like, here, just have something completely different. I think I've played 1 or 2 games using the I can't remember what it's even called now. Is it the tactical mission deck? Oh, the Leviathan deck.
The Leviathan deck.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I've only played a couple of games because I finally got my hands on the pack of cards. Looking forward to having some more games of that and sort of feeling it out. It's definitely, from that initial vibe, not Maelstrom, which is what I would have loved it to be, but it's not. Would probably still like to play some more Crusade and see how that shakes out, and also like to play some more boarding actions because we've been saying we've been doing that for a good year now. And maybe I'll find some time this year to paint that table up as well of boarding action stuff. So I feel like boarding actions does need a bit of a push in terms of, like, they just need to release a hardback book with, like, here's all the boarding action rules and missions all in one place, rather than the weird PDF thing that they gave us, which is sort of fine, but sort of not at the same time, because you've got to correlate between PDF and the actual 8th edition boarding action books, which doesn't quite work out being seamless. And then was the last one what I really want to see for the year?
Yeah, I suppose what you're... in terms of... Just to talk about, obviously, where you're at with the game, and also, I suppose, where I'm at with the game and all that other stuff, I think that's the interesting thing, I suppose, is people have heard extensively where we're kind of at with it at the minute. I kind of made my thoughts quite clear over time, which is that I think 40k as a competitive gaming system, though not, in my opinion, necessarily as balanced a competitive gaming system currently as maybe Age of Sigmar, I think it still only really works when played as a tournament game using tournament stipulations. I think playing 40k casually has a number of issues, but again, we've kind of extensively talked about that. Again, my relationship with 40k, the game, is still very good. I'm excited about Dark Angels. I'm excited about the balanced data slate and things that are coming down the line. I think this is the thing, though. I think they've definitely presided over a very difficult period of time with 40k at the minute, and I think that became most prevalent to me as I started re-engaging with the game, as I prepare for some upcoming tournaments, re-immersing myself in it and reminding myself of what's there. Obviously, myself and Phil are going to Warhammer World for an Age of Sigmar doubles, and because we are attending Warhammer World and going to an AOS doubles, I've been playing a lot of AOS, so I've become very immersed in that game lately. So going back to 40k is jarring in some respects, because there are things that you expect to be the same as AOS that are quite different now. But But the thing that you still can't really get your head around is like the units that are really good in 40k are definitely skewed to be overly good in 40k, right? So when you come up against things like Eldari, for example, there's so many things in Eldari that are silly, silly good. Night Spinners, Wraithguard squads. And I'm really interested to see what actually happens with the balanced data slate when it comes through, because Games Workshop have stated on multiple occasions that points are going to be the main kind of vehicle for fixing armies. But I genuinely do believe that with the Eldari, I think rules changes are required for the Eldari in order to make them more balanced as a force. I think things like the Night Spinner is a ridiculous example of something that is just too tooled up. It's too damaging, but also too demobilizing, too powerful in so many ways. And I think that's one of the uniquely interesting things about how 40k 10th edition was brought to market. It's heavily rumored, if not more or less confirmed now, that 40k 10th edition was actually done in quite a rush, and no more is that actually felt than in the indexes, where there is this kind of disconnect, and Games Workshop have essentially tried their very best over the last 6 months to try and course correct those, rushed rules creations that were the balance, not the balance data slates, the indexes. But there's still definitely haves and have-nots in that space. I'm really interested to see how that starts to play out and what that does for the health of the game, because I think we are all better off with 40k being a healthy, good game system. When 40k is good, it is good for everyone. It is a really, really important game. And when it isn't performing on point, that has an impact on the whole kind of space, not just obviously in terms of the level of engagement that people have with the hobby, and by extension, creators like ourselves who put out content about it, but also just, the retail sector that is built up around Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000 specifically. All these areas massively benefit from a healthy game with a robust player base. And I think that's, something that I really hope Games Workshop course correct, because I think we are better off with Warhammer 40,000 being in a good space. And I think at the moment it's quite divisive. I'm still okay with it, but I know plenty of people who have really, really gone off it. So I do think that one of my definite hopes for 2024 is that we see a really meaningful set of changes through the balanced data slates that ship earlier this year, or potentially, over the next couple of weeks. And I hope Games Workshop just make it better. And again, we can speculate about how they might make it better after you essentially say what you're most excited for, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense, and I'm kind of in agreement. I wasn't aware that 10th edition was particularly rushed in terms of its. Oh no, yeah. So it's been heavily the rumor that does the rounds or the statement that people make is that basically what 10th edition was once upon a time was an evolved form of 9th edition. So they basically took 9th edition, tweaked it, made it more balanced, made it make more sense, got rid of some of the bloat, did an incremental increase, and they were told that they were going to be doing these indexes to then further increase the balance. But then apparently the mandate came down that they wanted, senior management said, we wanted a dramatic change. We want a whole new edition. We don't want an iteration. We want it to be entirely new to justify the expense, apparently, of having to basically reset all the codexes or something silly that. So basically, yeah.
That they had to basically tweak everything in an afternoon, effectively.
That's really interesting if true, but also, unfortunately disappointing, because it's I think everyone just wanted a tweak and to fix a few things here and there and an incremental addition. And I think that's when additions sort of almost work best. It's. And I think now we're in a world of not general's handbooks. God, I've got such an AOS mindset. The chapter approved. You don't need big shifting edition changes anymore. It seems like, unless you are going to make sort of fundamental changes to the game. So Yeah, I think more people, ironically, would have been happier with a smaller set of changes than a big redo.
Yeah, 100%.
But it's one of those
I
things,
think,
I guess, and I'm not surprised either.
yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think incremental changes are definitely better and they lead to better systems overall. I think by the end of 9th edition, we were in an okay place. Armies were relatively balanced. It wasn't like crazy. Obviously, there were still some very high performing things and there was some bloat from stratagems that needed dealing with. But they could have very easily have done that. And that's the thing I suppose a lot of people had hoped for, is that we were going to get a universal set of special rules that were going to essentially streamline, instances where rules were very similar. Mm-hmm. Deep Strike, for example. Deep Strike has been called Deep Strike throughout the entirety of 8th and 9th edition, even though it was never referred to as Deep Strike. That word kind of stuck, and there were so many abilities that were essentially Deep Strike. Mm-hmm. It's like, we should just call that Deep Strike. Same thing for Infiltrate, same thing for Feel No Pain, same thing for what ended up being Lethal Hit, same thing for, everything, right? Like, that kind of philosophy was really needed, but the problem almost is that, they almost sort of changed too much. And I think this is the thing. I think Games Workshop as an entity are very, very, very blinkered, and I think a lot of people feel like they need to pursue this competitive scene and they need to satisfy that audience, and because that audience are the most vocal, or because that audience are perceived as being really important, and I don't dispute that they are important, because a healthy competitive scene is good for the overall perception and health of the hobby, or the gaming side of the hobby anyway. But the point is that Games Workshop of old used to give us flexibility. We used to get Eternal War missions, we used to get Maelstrom, and then kind of the competitive scene sort of looked after itself with the ITC and what that did. And I feel like that's the thing. It's like, I think if we were in a situation where they tailored it and essentially gave us some of that flex still. But as I said kind of a moment ago, I think the problem though is that the game is really now very aggressively balanced around the idea that you're going to play on these types of boards with this kind of terrain, because there's just so much lethality baked into everything. And, I was having this conversation with Joe the other day, and I was explaining to him what a unit of Cruel Boys, Archers, Bolt Boys do in Age of Sigmar, and how many points I pay for the privilege of having a unit that has range 12 to 24, shoots between 3 and 6 times, and has the potential of doing mortal wounds on 6s to hits, but is made of paper, right? Like in AOS, that's a 120-point unit. In 40k, in terms of its shooting output, it's probably the equivalent of, 3 guys with plasma guns, whereas, 3 guys with plasma guns would probably cost you, 60 points. I mean, if they had the armor profile of those Cruel Boys, it probably cost you 45 points. And I think that's the weird thing with 40k, is like, I feel like from a points and balancing perspective, it always feels like everything is a little bit undercosted in that game, and everything is very, very powerful. And you definitely end up in situations where lots of things are super powerful, like Chaos Space Marines at the moment are a prime example. Everything in Chaos Space Marines is dumb cheap and hits like a truck, and it's just like, this is a problem that they've got at the minute. So, I think a massive points overhaul, as well as also kind of, other balance tweaks, I think are really needed. And I really want to see that from Games Workshop. I want them to get it right. I was talking to Adam of 40k Brawl fame, and he made an interesting statement, which is that it seems that when it comes to balanced data slates, Games Workshop get about half of it right, i.e. they listen to the community, and we probably have like 100 things that we think need to change, and Games Workshop does between 45 and 55 of those things, and seemingly misses the most egregious bits of it. But we'll see what happens, mate. Is the long and short of it. I think, it would have definitely been cool had this just been a step up for 9th edition. I think we all would have been happier with that. But at the end of the day, we've got 10th edition. It is what it is. I don't doubt the 10th will get better. But it's definitely still got a ways to go, I suppose.
That's fair enough. It reminded me, because just today I was watching an interview by Andy Chambers, and he made two interesting points. One of them was that, he was like, only now in my sort of older years as a sort of senior games designer has he come to appreciate and realize that gamers don't like to learn new rules. And, they don't like change. And, basically, I think he was talking about Epic and how that from one edition of Epic to another, they completely changed the rules and how it effectively killed the game because it didn't bring in any new people, and the old players that liked second edition Epic didn't like the third edition, I think it was. And he was like, that was a bit of a mistake on our part, making it so fundamentally different. And, I sort of feel like there could be some learnings from that potentially. For 40k. And I also think in part that's just due to, at least for my part, at least like fatigue of editions happening so regularly. If editions were every like 5 years or 6 years, I think those bigger changes would be less of a problem, especially when we have chapter approved to fill the gap. The other thing that was really interesting, he said, he was like, the concept of I go, you go should have disappeared in third edition. And I think that was more retrospectively him looking back at the game. But that was really interesting that he thinks and he was saying things like it just skews too heavily to who goes first, and you need lots of other stuff to mitigate those kind of elements. It was interesting that hearing him say that even, I don't know if it was, I assume it was him now looking back, or maybe it was, we kind of knew it back then, but we we never sort of stuck to our guns to actually deliver that by taking out that kind of game format. So yeah, that was another interesting little tip that I thought from that interview.
Yeah, it is interesting, pal. And I think that's the thing, though. I think I like the you go, I go system, or vice versa. I think it's fine. I'm used to it, right? And it does have pitfalls, but I think they have kind of navigated around those as well as they can. I miss things like the 8th edition solution where you had the opportunity to bolster your defensive. Do you remember that? In the balanced data slates in 8th, where you could
yes,
your whole army to get cover to
one. Like spend, was it 1 CP or 2 CP or something to get it? Yeah, I think that was a really cool concept, and I quite enjoyed doing that. Because I guess I thought it was previous great. Editions had things like night fighting as a chance to happen, where you either capped out the range or had -1 to hit, or both. So yeah, it's interesting that we've sort of done away with that in favour of, I guess, just sort of giving benefits to scoring for whoever goes second, more so. So yeah, interesting for sure. I think there's definitely other ways they can go around it, and I think going back to the stuff I would like to see is that maybe more of a focus on narrative play, and therefore, or different ways of playing. Like we're saying, Maelstrom would be great to see in its kind of more truer form.
Yeah, I'm really kind of guarded around the term narrative play, right? Because to me, it's not necessarily about narrative play, but it is about casual play is more what I'm interested in. I don't want... I've never been a narrative player. It's just not really my vibe. I like gaming as a kind of, as an expression of, gameplay and all that sort of stuff. That's my vibe. But I do want a game that creates exciting moments and does fun stuff. I want fun games with memorable bits of it in it. And I will say this, man, I feel like 8th, 9th and 10th edition struggled to create moments. I think 8th did better than 9th or 10th is doing, but the game system definitely struggled to create moments. And that's what I'm really excited about when it comes to games like the Old World, because it feels like in the Old World, mad stuff happens. But I also experience it in Age of Sigmar. Like the other day, we were playing a game together. You, me, Tim, Richie got together, played some Age of Sigmar. My Maw Crusher, that has, a vicious reputation amongst our group of friends, always does well. Ran in to a bunch of ghouls on horses and some nurgly lads. He was heavily wounded, So he only had like maybe 5 or 6 attacks on the Maw Crusher itself. The guy on top had like 8 attacks or something like that. I charge in and I'm like, right, I'm hitting on 2s, roll those dice. I roll like 4 1s and a 2, and then I'm like, brilliant. And then I get like 1 wound off, and then you save it. And I'm like, great, this is fantastic. And then like the guy on top swings and whiffs. And again, that's created because in AOS, there was no like re-rolls. I can stack up my to hit rolls. Oh, that was it as well. Yeah, your horses gave me -1 to hit. That's what it was. And yeah, the whole thing just sort of went wibbly. And then, yeah, the Maw Crusher died, and it was a magical moment for all involved. But the point is like, I do feel like 40k's ability to control the odds the way it does with all the re-rolls and stacking of buffs and things to create more opportunities for more re-rolls. It's probably its most fatal flaw. I think genuinely the re-roll system in 40k is probably the thing that I sincerely wish they got rid of, having played a lot of AOS now and understanding how good it is to not have all those re-rolls. Because, you know, when you do something in AOS or you do something in a system that isn't littered with re-rolls, it feels earned. It feels remarkable. Whereas in 40k, it's just, of course. You know,
yes.
It's like, yeah, of course I get.
But I think it also
happens.
speeds up the game just generally if there's not a lot of re-rolls. And then, as you say, gives you these fun narrative elements, which you would otherwise avoid. Like the classic one is, you roll on the... well, I think they've obviously gotten rid of it now in 9th edition, right? Where you roll on does your vehicle explode when it dies, dice, and you roll a 1, but you go, okay, I'll just come up with re-roll that so it doesn't happen. So like, that's a fun narrative moment that you just avoid because you can re-roll it.
10th edition does have exploding. It's called Deadly Demise.
Oh yes, but I mean you can't re-roll that roll though now.
No, you can't.
That's what I
meant.
meant. Sorry.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Understood.
So you are forcing at least some of those narrative mechanics. And yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it's less about, let's say, narrative gaming, because that could mean lots of things to different people. But I think fundamentally having missions that are more dynamic or more asymmetrical or have a story sort of baked into it, that it isn't just down to, end of each turn, I hold 1, hold 2, hold more. Those kind of quite simplistic, and you know, that's a really straightforward scoring system, and I like that for the sort of simplicity of it. It's not as bad as, I think, was it 9th edition or maybe in bits of 8th, where you have you sometimes score at different parts of the turn. Like sometimes you score,
that was 9th edition.
Sometimes you score end of your turn or end of battle round, or both. Sometimes it's like stuff like that. I think is better that it's been cleaned up. But yeah, it's all more asymmetric scoring or you're doing, you know, classic missions from like White Dwarf, which is like the ritual where you're like trying to summon something and your opponent has to stop you, or you got to assassinate a character. Quite sort of narrative hooks for your sort of end of game objective, rather than necessarily turn by turn stuff. And if you're doing turn by turn, sort of the more Maelstrom vibe is, I think, more interesting. And you do get that to a lesser extent with the Leviathan deck.
Yeah, 9th edition was where they introduced a lot of the weird, do this in this turn and you get 2 points. Do this at this part of the turn and you get 8 points. Do this at this part of the turn and you get 1 point. Yes. It was wild. It was very odd. But then similarly, we've kind of just gotten used to it, right? It's the frog boiling in water analogy, where it's like now, like I'm sure if we'd gone straight from like 8th edition into 10th edition, it would have been such an extreme that we would have been like, what the heck is going on? Because we had that kind of bridge of 9th edition, which was itself quite extreme as well. I mean, I remember the comments I made at the time about it, but the point is that, yeah, I think, my hope is, it aligns with you really, is that, like, you know, I think we need balance. I think Games Workshop really need to deliver and iron out a lot of the issues with some of the problem units in the game. I think they need to continue to work on the system and try and get more familiarity with it. But I think this is the only weird thing about it is that weird thing where you feel like in a little bit of a holding pattern with the game at the moment, because it is just sort of systematically releasing codexes at the minute. And it's like, okay, cool. What's the secret sauce on top of all of this? That's the thing that I'm sort of interested in, because in ninth edition 40k, it was the Warzone books, right? Like the Warzone books were the extra bit that they chucked on top to start to try and flesh out a narrative. In this edition, they are regularly releasing these Crusade books, and these Crusade books seem like they should be something that you should care about, but I struggle to find the motivation. They've obviously announced that there's a new Necron one, and that looks swanky, I suppose, but at the same time, I've not really got a grasp of what that's actually adding or what that's doing for the game overall. I'm like, okay, cool, Necrons, whatever. I think the thing that's actually quite interesting about 40k right now, and what this edition sort of represents to me still, and why I'm probably also underwhelmed with it at this point, is it also feels like the edition of iteration, or not even iteration, but just enhancement, right? It's like you look at the Space Marines, right? The new Space Marine release was a bunch of stuff that already existed, done again in Primaris form. You know, like the Dark Angels release is one new unit, which is basically their version of a command squad, which happens to be a bunch of Risen, but whatever. So you get a command squad, which you already have a command squad. They did a command squad for Space Marines.
These are more like bodyguards, I guess. I think, rather than a command squad.
Oh, fine.
But, you know, you have similar models that do similar things. I think you're right. There's model wise, so far we're getting a lot of old stuff redone and a smattering of new things. Obviously we've got Striking Scorpions that have come. We've Primaris Scouts. All stuff like that, which is all great. They're all great models. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head.
Great models.
Rules-wise, there's nothing exciting to look forward to for the edition ahead. But what people are excited about is new models. Models sell, obviously, we all know that. People are excited by models all the time. It's one of the things we talk about the most on this podcast. But as you're right, there's obviously the Warzone. There's no Warzone books. There's no kind of
that we know of.
No, true. There's no necessarily grand narrative other than, I guess, they sort of started off with Leviathan, but have they done more with it? No. Have they done anything else with the edition so far? And we're, I guess, over 6 months in. Whereas this time in 8th or 9th, we had like 5 or 6 codexes by now. We had loads come out straight away. I guess maybe not
really
9th because of
had
COVID, so that was slightly delayed. But we knew lots of stuff was coming. Obviously, we've had 4 so far, so maybe I'm being a bit disingenuous. It's not 2, but it feels like 2.
I think you're being a bit unfair to it.
But you're right. It doesn't feel like there's as much excitement for the edition as a whole, and maybe that is
you look at
things like. Not having Warzone books. But talking about those Crusade books, it'd be interesting to have a look at them. I can't remember exactly, other than the actual Crusade rules, what was in Leviathan. I can't remember if there was like a campaign system in there. And that would be great to see in these new ones, if in each book there's a different campaign sort of style of way of playing in addition to the Crusade rules. Because that's what you got in the Warzone books. You got Crusade rules, you got the Armies of Renown, and you also got a campaign system to play it as well. Not that we ever played any of those campaign systems, but it was great to read through, great to see that, they're there for people that do want to explore campaign systems. So that was good.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? I'm not crying out for a new Warzone book, right? Like I don't need that necessarily, but what I'm saying is like, yeah, what are the ideas? Because at the moment, right, the NID release was all right. It was good even, right? They gave us a new version of a Hive Tyrant, which to me was like a massive letdown. The Norn Emissary and the Norn, whatever the other one's called, the Norn Rampager or whatever it is. Relative.
Yes.
Yeah, like, fine. Give a new Hive Tyrant. Cool, great. The Hive Tyrants exist, but fine. Give me a slightly bigger one, great. The plastic Lictor was amazing. The plastic Biovore, Pyrovore, amazing. New Gaunt models, amazing. Gene Stealers, amazing. The new variants of Lictor, i.e. like the Neuro Lictor, fabulous. Those new like Orion's Leapers and the dudes with
the barbed shooters, yeah.
Yeah, and the psychic ones with the bug on the bug thing. Those were all pretty underwhelming, but like that's the thing, right? Like when you look at the NID release, the NID release was mostly resculpts of old stuff, an unnecessary but albeit quite cool and quite good in the game shock horror unit in the Norn emissary and the Norn punchy spit acid version, and then some extra troops that you're a bit like, yeah, they're all right, whatever. And that's like the biggest release we've had, right? And then Marines, new Terminators, which are gorgeous, but they are just an iteration. New Scouts, which are gorgeous, but again, an iteration. New characters that are themselves, iterations in Terminator. This is my thing. It's like, the new unit that the Space Marines got was a Primaris Marine with a different gun in the form of Infernus Marines. Like, that's the only new thing that's technically been added to Space Marines. That and that and the Command Squad, which again is just a sort of upgrade of what was there before, because Command Squads were in there before. So yeah, it's like it's fine. It's absolutely fine, but it's not. And I think that's the trend we're going to see this edition. I think we're going to get the AdMech release was pretty dire. That guy on stilts was so underwhelming, and the Necron release was like, yeah, all right, great. I mean, you're giving me. I mean, admittedly, they got quite a healthy release. They got 3 characters, 2 characters. They got like a decent amount of new stuff by the standards of a codex of that ilk. They got maybe 2 new characters, I want to say. I can't remember the names of them on the top of my head. The Trazan, the Infinite, and what's his chops, the other one. And then obviously Dark Angels, it's like, new Terminators, new versions of your characters, and then new Deathwing Knights. So it's all iterative. It's like,
but I mean, that's not necessarily bad. Like, if a lot of these sculpts are old and dated, yes, great to get new ones, but at the same time, it's not as exciting as a brand new unit or like a new faction. Exactly. And I think those are the things that are gonna get the juices flowing, that people will really enjoy. And maybe it's like a process of, we've kind of got to get through this edition where maybe every army is going to be effectively up to date, get updated with brand new sculpts, and then we can look forward to new stuff. And it'll be interesting which direction they go then. It's like, are they going to then add more and more units to each faction, or are we just maybe going to just get new factions as like big releases? I guess they're always going to try and add to factions, but you do get to a point where you're like, do you really need more stuff for your army? Like, it's cool to buy stuff, but do I really need like a cool new unit for my army that kind of has enough tools in the box to do everything? And even if it doesn't, that should be there by design. It's like, I would love a close combat infantry unit for guard, because I think visually that'd be really awesome. The only close combat unit you really have for guard, well, you got Rough Riders and you got Ogrins. To me, they're the only 2 I can really think of. But I'd love to see just regular guardsmen with like axes or something, a bit like how you get in Solar Auxilia. And that would fill a niche, but you could say, thematically, they're meant to be a shooty army. They're not really meant to be that great close combat. So, don't plug that gap, and don't make every army a Swiss Army tool that can do everything. But potentially, if you're constantly adding and adding to an army, that's what you're going to end up with eventually. Like, they've got to cap them at some point.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. But yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, for me at the moment, I'm really excited about the potential for a new faction in 40k. Again, coming from the world of Age of Sigmar, as I've been playing lately, one of the things about Age of Sigmar that's also kind of interesting is that obviously so often in AOS we're getting really meaningful updates to armies all the time, right? So like Cities of Sigmar was amazing. Flesh Eater Courts was amazing. Like these were really meaningful releases in AOS that dramatically changed those armies. Like Flesh Eater Courts is, again, quite iterative. It is basically, we had Flesh Eater Courts, now we've made them better, but they feel more substantial. Cities of Sigmar, again, feels more substantial. They were like, well, Cities of Sigmar is kind of like a smoosh boosh of loads of different stuff, but now they've created this new like range of humans that are phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like the sculpts are amazing, and it feels meaningful. And I think that's the thing with 40k. It's like, you know, Votan coming out in the last edition, World Eaters coming out in the last edition. You know, these were two reasonable armies. I mean, Votan to me, I'm not a fan of the range, and the rules were even worse. And at the moment, they seem to reside in a very strange place that I'm not really sure what the point of them is. But people tend to like them, so good on them. World Eaters, I was way more there for. Like World Eaters were cool,
Yeah,
but I do feel like
here's the thing with
give us something.
Here's
New.
the thing with the Cities of Sigma range. Like, you could say, yes, you've taken humans and you've given them more humans, and you had a cannon before and you've just got a new cannon. You could argue that it's similar to the sort of upscaling of detail between the, you know, scouts and Primaris scouts. But I would say they actually just didn't take the Empire units and make them look nicer, which is kind of what they would probably be doing with Bretonians, right? Although they're trying to keep the size and scale similar. But with Cities of Sigma, they took fantasy-style humans and then gave an Age of Sigma twist to it. What you got visually was very different from the old fantasy line of the Empire. And I think that's what was so good about that range refresh. And same with the ghouls as well, the Flesh Eater Court, right? You got bog standard like ghouls, and then the new version was this really mad, twisted take on it where they are visually the embodiment of the madness, where they think they're all knights, right? Or they're peasantry. They're all like effectively Bretonians in Age of Sigma, but they're all descended into madness and cannibals. Like, but visually, that's now what they look like. Whereas in the lore, that's just what you heard they did, because they look like they're waving banners, but it's made of flesh and bones. And they've got like kind of cavalry units and all sorts now. And I think that was fantastically done. And that is taking an old line, refreshing it in a completely new way, I think. Whereas what we're getting with the 40k stuff is you're just getting a nicer version of the same thing. And like, obviously the Terminator models, we bang on about being amazing because they are, but they are just really nice versions of old models. They haven't drastically changed the design or anything. And I don't think people actually want that either with necessarily their fantasy, so with their 40k stuff. They do just want nicer looking versions of those models, but they're not necessarily inspiring the same excitement that other range refreshes will get. And I think we will see more like a continuation of those range refreshes. So I think, you know, Votan's had like what we called wave 1. It will no doubt get another wave of miniatures this year. I think Eldari will get the same as well. So hopefully we'll get things like warp spiders and stuff, because they do have really like aging minis. I think that will happen. It'll be interesting with some of the Imperial Guard stuff if we get that. Like, because what always threw me for a loop is that they actually updated the Sentinel, because I always thought, yes, the Sentinel was an old design, but it still looked good enough and it didn't need to be redone. So it does make me wonder if they're going to ever redo, you know, the Basilisk or the Chimera or the Lehman Russ, which are very old kits, much like we've got with, you know, the Rhino and the Land Raider. But a lot of the vehicles don't seem to be changing in 40k because they sort of still stand up to the test of time. So it will be interesting to see what happens with those kits, if they keep them or if they will change them eventually.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I do think that's the thing. I think 40k for me this year, what I want out of it is, you know, I desperately want just, you know, the game to get a bit healthier, for them to definitely rejig the points, sort out some of the problem units, do some fun releases, create some interesting stuff, and, you know, for people to hopefully be excited about it in the way that they were, you know, this time last year, when, you know, interest in the hobby seemed very strong. You know, there was a lot of hype around 10th edition. People were excited because they thought this was going to be a really amazing time for the game, that we were going to sort of, you know, be returning to the kind of, you know, highly praised time of early 8th edition, which is viewed with a lot of, you know, pomp and circumstance almost. People, remark upon Index 8th edition as one of the best times in the game. I personally think that End Time 8th edition was the best version of that game. I think the period of time prior to the release of the first of the Psychic Awakening books, I think that was really where the game was fantastic. Truthfully, actually, though, I actually think that the Rise of the Phoenix book was actually quite a good book as well. I think actually, basically at the point of Rise of the Phoenix is probably where I would place the game as probably being in its best form, because actually I feel like, but then I say that Rise of the Phoenix, that's probably just because of my bias as an Eldari player and the fact they gave me lots of fun rules there. But it didn't feel too much at that point. Like it felt like they get, and don't forget, they threw other perks and benefits at other armies
in each one,
yes, proves and other things, and they did flesh it out a bit more. But definitely Chaos Space Marines and Imperial Guard or Astra Militarum were struggling in the last months of 8th edition. So I do have to obviously acknowledge that it wasn't great for everyone.
Well, they did get quite a good in the sort of Tower and Guard book. I can't remember what that was called now. Yeah. They did get some, because of what I really liked about that is the I'm trying to remember the names. Not Stormtroopers.
The tank aces?
No, Tempestus Scions. Yes, you got the tank aces.
Oh, they had great
the Tempestus
rules.
Scions had their own kind of sub-faction rules. It's like, if you just want to run them, they've got their own different regiments that you could run. And they were pretty solid. Like, I tested a few of them out. They were good fun. You couldn't necessarily build an entire army around them, because you normally effectively had to have in an extra detachment or some kind. But they were great. They're really thematic. I did love them. And it'd be, so I guess having some more narrative flavors for, in addition maybe to your codex, will we see stuff like that, like the Armies of Renown for 40k? That would be interesting. Chapter Approved is going to come this year, I presume summertime, and it'll be interesting to see what that does for the game, if they make some fundamental changes to rules, if it will just be a more consolidated version of these balanced data slate updates that we get. Could just be that. I assume it will be a new set of missions alongside another deck. So the Leviathan deck lasts a year, and I suspect this year we'll get, I don't know, Prior Nexus, because that's the current. I mean, might not be, because there'll probably be a couple more Crusade books down the line, but it'd be interesting if the Leviathan deck sticks around for more than 1 year. I can't see it happening.
I didn't think the Leviathan deck was getting more than 6 months, mate. I think they're about to replace it.
Oh, well, that would be interesting if it only gets 6 months. Oh, geez. Yeah, the churn of this is too quick, I would say. And that's been my general takeaway for ages about, the editions in general. Chapter Approved, or even the decks going to 6 months. Like, that's fine if you're a real hardcore competitive player, but most people aren't. And it's like, have something a bit more stable so someone can buy a book. It lasts at least a year. Fun facts, Dan, back to my parents' loft, having a flick through some of the old books that I found up there. I found the old Dwarf Army book from 5th edition, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and I checked online to see that to double check that it was the 5th edition, and I believe it was both the 4th and 5th edition book. And you got that in previous editions of Warhammer 40k, where sometimes a codex would last several editions, and in a lot of ways you would look and you would think that was a real negative. It's like, dear Lord, I bought a book that lasted me 6 years. Like, in a way, so long as it was balanced, that is actually fantastic news. You don't need change for the sake of it, but people only want change. Like when I was desperate for a 9th edition Guard Codex, it was only because of the power imbalance. Yes, there were some extra spicy rules on top of it in terms of army construction, but it was mostly, the army was just really lacking in balance and power behind everything else, and that's why people wanted those codexes.
Yeah, I mean, in defense to the Astra Militarum, though, you guys have gone like 5 years, 3 months between codexes at that point. So that was a significant amount of time, right? Like, I mean, Guard were like the 2nd or 3rd
Yeah, I think they were the second
fourth.
because they came out. I think directly after, or maybe it was maybe a third.
No, they were either the
'cause
third or
it
the
was
fourth.
it was Space Marines. Then it was Death Guard, I think. Then it was Guard, and then they were basically second to last of the 9th edition.
Well, it was either Guard or Chaos Space Marines. I can't remember. It was either Guard or Chaos Space Marines that came first. But the point is that you guys went a long time without a book. You weren't in the same part, same area as like the Drakari. I mean, the Drakari were running on a 3rd edition book until mid 5th edition. So they went.
And this thing like Custodes lasted ages from 8th to 9th edition, but their codex was strong enough that it didn't actually matter. Like they weren't necessarily crying out for a new codex because they were actually always doing well kind of competitively. And I think that's the issue. If you've got a good codex, you don't need to change it. It could last more than one edition. But we've got now sort of almost wrapped up in this cycle of new editions and a new codex for every edition. My bugbear is that there's just editions too soon and too often.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's the thing, though, right? In terms of my outlook on 2024 and 40k, I'm excited to see what they're going to do with the Blood Angels. I think Blood Angels are a really interesting chapter. Are they going to get like significant updates in 2024? I feel like seeing what they've done for the Dark Angels is really positive, although, again, as is always the way with GW in these situations, some stuff is getting left behind. It has been confirmed that Nephilims and Dark Talons, Vengeances and Shrouds are staying. The Ravenwing Black Knights, along with the Ravenwing Command Squad and Samael on his jet bike, all that's staying. But all of the land speeder stuff is obviously going, and all the original kind of old bike squad stuff is
I like
gone.
how you say it's been
so now
confirmed,
you have to run like Outriders.
Like, is this rumor mill or is this Games Workshop Warhammer Community?
It's rumor mill by people who have the book.
All right, okay. Is that something we want to talk about?
Well, a trusted source.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, that's to be expected. Like,
by the way, that's
a lot of the vehicles and stuff have always stuck around, so that makes sense.
Well, it was relatively evident that they weren't going to get rid of that, but it seems likely that the Talon Master has gone away. And anyway, it is what it is. I think the point is that, as always is the case, there's always something kind of left behind in these situations. But I think overall, seeing what they've done with the Dark Angels is exciting. So let's see what happens with the Blood Angels. Feels like the Space Wolves is always like the red-headed stepchild at the moment. Noting obviously that many Space Wolves are probably red-headed. So maybe that's not by accident. But I do really want to see Space Wolves get some love as well. Like, I'd love a really meaningful, chunky Space Wolf release. I think Space Wolves, when I got into the hobby, back in 2nd edition, Space Wolves were the Space Marine army. Like, Ultramarines were kind of the poster children, not really. They were kind of, they were aspirants, but they weren't there yet. Really, in many respects, 2nd edition was the game of the Blood Angels. Like, Blood Angels were kind of like the poster children, but the army that all of the cool kids wanted and all of the people were always waxing lyrical about and saying they're the best Space Marines were Space Wolves. Definitely because of the fact they were very good in game, but also just because the range was super interesting and they had some great characters and there was just something quite, evocative about the idea of the Space Wolf. So yeah, I'd love to see a really, really healthy Space Wolf release. Noting that what I'm basically asking for is the thing that I said wouldn't be that exciting, which is they're going to update Thunderwolf Cavalry and they'll update the Terminators and they'll update the squads, and it'll be like, all right, cool, whatever.
It's just a necessary evil, let's say, and it's not even that bad. It's just one of those things where a lot of the sculpts do look a bit dated, and they just need to get redone, and that isn't as wowing and as exciting as brand new units or taking factions in like new directions. New archetypes, stuff like that, or even new factions. Yeah, so, but I think we'll see a lot of that for the next couple of years, and I'm sure they will excite us with smatterings of new units thrown in here and there. I'm sure with obviously the Votan update will all be new units, obviously. I'm sure with Eldari, I'm sure they get a couple more new units, like they did in the last wave. Like you got was it the Rangers on the bikes? I can't remember what they were called.
Yeah, the Shroud Runners.
Shroud Runners, yeah. So it's not like they're just redoing all the old stuff and nothing new. Like Tyranids got new stuff. Primaris technically sort of got new stuff. Weirdly, they got new stuff.
They got Infernus Marines.
Well, they got Infernus Marines, but just prior to that, they got like the Brutalis. Oh, and they got the.
They did, yeah.
Oh, what's the shooty one called? The new Dreadnoughts.
Desolation.
No, well, they got Desolation Marines,
Ballistas.
but Ballistas, that's it. Yeah, so they got all of those. Some of them were just prior to Leviathan. Some of them were part of Leviathan. So everyone's getting some new stuff. Unless you're Necrons, I don't think they got anything new unit-wise. Because some people are just getting characters and stuff like that, like Admech. But at least that was I don't know. Even though I didn't like the design, an interesting sort of character. It wasn't just a Necron Overlord, for example.
Yeah. So what's the in your sort of dream scenario, I guess, what is the thing that you're wanting to see in 2024? What's your, I suppose I'll ask you for two of them. What do you think we're going to see before the end of the year? What do you think is likely to happen before the end of the year? And what is your like wild card? You want to see it more than anything. Prediction.
Ooh.
Like what is it? Yeah.
Right, that one probably need a bit of thought. I think the one that is likely to come is Plastic Krieg. I think that's been, or Katchan, one of the two. I think both have been rumoured for a while to be coming, and that will be really interesting to see. I think it'll be probably quite good for Plastic Krieg fans. I will hold my hand on my heart and I'll say I'm not too fussed by it because I've got my Krieg army. It's pretty much complete. If they were ever doing more Forge World Krieg, oh, God, wouldn't that be lovely? But that is a completely different matter because the Plastic Krieg just aren't quite the same. But it will be interesting to see what they do if they do it, like what models will port over from Forge World. Will Forge World Krieg disappear at some point? Probably, sadly, because it feels like, Forge World is now a specialist games studio, so they're running down their 40k line pretty much, or it's becoming part of Horus Heresy. Obviously, we've got Plastic Solar Auxilia coming, so I suspect a lot of those old iconic Forge World Astra Militarum units like Basilisks, Malcadors, stuff like that will potentially all go over to Plastic, which could be then repurposed for 40k. If they allow it rules-wise, which, maybe they'll actually start phasing that stuff out, and it will go to 40k Legends, much like a lot of the Space Marine Horus Heresy stuff. So that will be another sad violin string to be played if that is the case. But I also wouldn't be surprised by it. But yeah, Krieg stuff would be cool to see. Be great to bring back Grenadiers because we haven't had them in years. The Centaur Tractor, God, that would be awesome to see resurrected again. Death Riders in Plastic, I know people want that. So that would be also interesting to see. Engineers, because they're the ones that actually don't have rules at the moment whatsoever. So that would also be lovely because, purely from a practical game sense, it would be lovely to be able to play with them. So that would be cool. That's the thing I suspect will likely be happening. I'll let you say what you think is going to happen, and I'll have a think about my wild card option.
Yeah, no, I think on my end, in terms of what I think we are probably going to see this year, I think it is highly probable that we get a new faction this year. That's obviously been teased with the question mark codex. Again, there's all sorts of possibilities for what that actually could be in practice. Perchance it's the second wave of Votan. Perchance it's, something relatively underwhelming. But I think in all probability it's going to be something. Could it be the Dark Mechanicus? A lot of people seem to feel like that is where it's going.
That'd be
I
nice.
think another Chaos faction. Yeah, I think another Chaos faction would be
Well, I
good.
think-
And by another Chaos faction, I mean one that isn't just another type of Chaos.
Oh,
Space
I was
Marine.
going to say Emperor's
Um,
Children is due a release at some point, but I have literally been saying this for about 5 years now. So it'll be great when, Slanesh gets a bit of a redo in 40k. Emperor's Children comes out. That would be great. Dark Mechanicum, good shout. Also, Traitor Guard, I would love to see as well. That would be an awesome sort of 40k new army.
What I'd actually really like to see in terms of the Chaos faction stuff, though, is if they gave us a kind of army that included elements like some Dark Mechanicum units, because obviously they've given us Vashtor, right? So like Vashtor feels like he needs like an army around him, right? Like we saw this with, well, to be fair, they had already done Skitarii and Abmech by the time they did Belisarius Call, although the story goes that they kind of started with Belisarius Call and then kind of worked down into the
What,
rest
the
of the
design
ranges.
studio story?
I believe so,
Okay.
yeah. I think there was like interviews where they sort of were talking about how it started with this Belisarius Call sculpt and then kind of worked its way up from there, or at least in terms of the priesthood. I think, anyway, like I mean, who knows how all of that stuff worked. But yeah, I think Vashtor's existence, Vashtor needs an army around him. He feels like too significant a character just to be yet another entity within the Chaos Space Marines. Yeah. But I do also feel like, though, one of the things that he kind of represents, which could be more interesting, is if Vashtor, in addition to the Dark Mechanicus, also created the kind of Demonkin option as well. Because one of my favourite codexes from 7th edition Warhammer 40,000 was Khorne Demonkin. I think Khorne Demonkin was a really fun concept, and that was the merger of demons and space marines and cultists all kind of smushed together. And one of the things that has become evident from AOS is that AOS is definitely in the business of creating factions that are themed around a specific god and then incorporate demons of that god into its ranks. I don't necessarily think that Games Workshop are going to be able to follow that template with things like Death Guard, World Eaters, although at this moment in time, who knows, maybe when they come around to doing World Eaters, they just go, you know what? World Eaters are now just Codex Khorne, and they incorporate demons into it, kind of like foregoing the oddity of that and just being like, look, at this point in time, they're led by a demon Primarch. They're basically now fully in there with like demons. So Khorne demons and World Eaters work alongside each other. Similarly with like Death Guard and the Nurgle demons, and same strangely with Thousand Suns and Zinch demons, even though Thousand Suns aren't really that into Zinch, but whatever. The point is that like, even though they obviously are, but yeah, I think some kind of Demonkin element to it as well would be fun to see, like where they start to kind of bring them into the mix as well. Maybe what would actually be really fun is if, as part of that, they give us some unaligned demons or demons of Vashtor. So actually started to incorporate that into it as well. So it's chaos undivided, so to speak. And that incorporates Dark Mechanicum, that incorporates the cult element, and it incorporates Vashtor and actually makes more of a... Yeah, what was that usually called? Renegades or whatever, that is.
It was
like
Renegade Guard is how it was referred to in Forge World, but back when they had the sort of the Traitor Guard units, and that could incorporate a bit of everything. So it's
I think that's the way to go though, right? Like just smush it all together, take everything that isn't a Space Marine out of Chaos Space Marines, take the cultists, take all of it. Like, okay, fair enough, you can put that in, but just make that an ally situation then, and then it becomes a case of like there's Renegade / Traitor Legions, which is basically Black Legion, and the variants there, and then just make Chaos into this really interesting, like, this interesting spooge boosh of all the different books.
Yeah.
So it's like, admittedly it becomes really tedious for Chaos players because they're like, oh, I've got to have my Khorne book for the Khorne stuff and whatever. But I think that's quite a beautiful expression of Chaos in that
one
way.
thing that was great in, I think, 2nd edition Age of Sigmar, was the sort of the Grand Alliance books, and I think that was in part because I can't remember if that was their way of like indexing it and go, here's all the rules for all the factions, but I don't necessarily think that was. But imagine one for like Imperium and for Chaos, where they go, here's a book with maybe not all of them, but the vast majority of units. So you can do, here's my Grand Crusade army that I want to play. There's some knights in there. There's some Dark Mechanicum. Yeah, there might be a unit or two of Space Marines in there, and there's lots of Traitor Guard or Renegade Guard of some kind, and demons as well. And it's representing this mass army that could appear on the battlefield that's on like a campaign or something like that. That would be it'd be a great way of introducing new models, like they have been doing with Kill Team, without necessarily going, well, here's a brand new army, because doing that's actually, I imagine, quite difficult for them to do. But having a way where you can have a cheese board of delights of cherry picking different elements from the Grand Alliances of Imperium and Chaos would be quite interesting. Likewise, I've always said, wouldn't it be cool if you're a Guard player and you have like not necessarily a unit of Custodes? I've always thought Custodes in others should just be like one or two models. But you could be like, cool, here's my main army, but I've got a little smattering of other things. I've got my knights, I've got my some assassins, an inquisitor, got some Custodes. Wouldn't that be cool? Now I guess they have done that in the past, and they've kind of given you that structure within the Alliance, not the Allies Matrix, because that's not what it is now. It's is it the Forces of Inquisition? They keep renaming it, so I can't remember exactly what it is now.
Well, there's the Imperial Agents, and then they've also got the
Chaos version as well.
Titanicus. They've got the Titanicus, and then they've also got the Knights.
Yeah.
So when you go into like allies for an Imperial faction, you can either add an Imperial Agent, a Titanicus unit, or a Knight unit.
So they could do something specific for Chaos that is maybe a bit more themed and tailored, but it does represent that sort of thing where you have a smattering of each things from every sort of sub-faction within their range. Dark Mechanicum I feel like is underrepresented. People have been crying out for Dark Mechanicum army for years. Weirdly, I'm just reading Mechanicum for Horus Heresy, and I think that's book 8. And that's so early on in the Horus Heresy story where they talk about and go into detail about Dark Mechanicum and how they get created, basically. And it's like, even in the Horus Heresy range, like, there are no real Dark Mechanicum models except one that's a character. So I feel like that is, and maybe that's what's slightly problematic about it, is obviously it's a faction that exists within both settings, and it feels like those two settings are always competing for model ranges. So if they do one for Horus Heresy, would it have to be distinctly for Horus Heresy and not compatible with 40k and with the 40k one? Because I think, at least with Dark Mechanicum, much like with Chaos, like they've descended into darkness and would be a lot more twisted, and it's air quotes evil looking in the 40k version than necessarily would on the outset of Horus Heresy. So you could have two visually different armies, but I guess that would be the interesting internal conundrum for the Games Workshop studio to work that out, how that army would look, not just in one game system but in two, and in two different time periods.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that is a riddle that they could solve. But I do think, for me, I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see some kind of Dark Mechanicus, Vashtor, smush of, stuff for Chaos. I think it's going to be, because again, I just think that's the thing. I think the Chaos stuff that isn't one of the main 4 legions is always still, one of the main 5 legions is always still massively underrepresented. And by the 5th Legion, I mean the Black Legion, which is, by its nature, a legion. It's in the name. But I think that's the thing with Chaos. Everything's very through the filter of the Black Legion and the respective kind of traitor legions that are still out there and flying around. And obviously, Iron Warriors, Alpha Legion, Emperor's Children, could we see an Emperor's Children list? Maybe this year. we could get Emperor's Children. I don't think so, but it's obviously on the horizon. But yeah, Chaos just feels like at the moment where it's just lots of different flavour of Space Marine, which is fine because obviously that's popular. But I would like, again, just to see like that expression through the Dark Mechanicus, through the Renegade Guardsman, through Vashtor, through the Demon Kin, more demon engines, right? Like the Soul Grinder is a janky old terrible model.
Oh yeah,
but it's got personality, you know.
Yeah, true.
and I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see more big old demon machines, you know.
I think I'd quite like to see more new types of demons as well. I think that'd be quite interesting.
Oh, I'd love that.
Because they feel like it's like they're all bit by the numbers at the moment. It's like Khorne, got your, what was it, Bloodletters. Nurgle, you got your Plague Bearers. It's like, hey, cool, but let's have some other stuff. You know, maybe more sort of, let's say, battle line units for each of those where they're like slightly more interesting demons. Just go wild. Do all sorts of things. Give me, I don't know, floating, blood rain, or weird square cubes with like thousands of eyes on them. I mean, go proper, like, out there. Give me, Lovecraftian madness, basically. Actually, that's reminded me of.
Give me.
Go on.
I was going to say, give me a model that I can mold out of a big jelly. You know, sell me a jelly mold. I'll wobble it over.
Yeah, give me the blob. Yeah, that would be fantastic. Well, weirdly, I did for my mission random mission generator. One of the missions was basically the blob, and it had basically different nodal points that you shot at to shrink it down, which would then uncover the objectives that it's glooped over. So yeah, so I think in general, when we talked about it in the last episode, like mad monsters, stuff like that, I think would be really cool. Like creatures or bestiary of Xenos creatures that you could add to your game in some fashion would be awesome. And obviously, I think Tau and Dark Elder Drukhari are best placed for adding those into the game, and that was something they always did, but it feels like those sort of elements, especially for Drukhari, sort of fallen by the wayside. So, and again, that's quite an older range, so hopefully they get an update at some point. That'd be cool. I do have my mad pick, unless you've got anything more to say.
No. Although intriguingly, you've just sort of spoken about what my mad pick was more going to be, which is the idea of taking the existing kind of stuff like the Amble and the Zote and creating. I know I talked about it in the outro of the last episode, but here's my mad ask. I want a Tau. Like I want like a Tau David Attenborough book. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like I want someone in the Tau Empire, like an old fire warrior or whatever it is, who is their equivalent of a David Attenborough, flying around the universe, documenting and, you know, giving me a different perspective on the universe. Because the problem always is everything's always told through the eyes of the Imperium. I quite like the idea of a Tau going out there and documenting their negotiations. It's like, went to the planet of murder today, tried to negotiate with Mega Arachnid, did not go too well. You know, whatever it is, like some kind of interesting diatribe around, or some interesting diary of a... And then that becoming like a rule set, and then actually creating like missions or things where it's like talking about the history. Like that's the thing that, honestly, at this stage, that's the sort of stuff that I want to see sort of expressed. I want to see more narrative, interesting games where they give us systems where they go, hey, if you wanna, here's a unit of Mega Arachnids, and this is a mission that you can play, and it's asymmetric, and there's a big one, and you got to deal with it, and then you can, you know, basically, you know, the rules for it, or we've created rules where they come back or whatever, and you've got to fortify your defenses, and you got to, you know, it's like that scene in
Starship Troopers.
Starship Troopers, you know, it's like, yeah, we got to recreate that for you, or whatever it is. Like, create interesting theatrical stuff, but also expand the world. One of the things that I thought was so awesome about the Astarte series was not the fact that the Space Marines are animated cool. It was the fact that dude, on his own, created intriguing, interesting layers of storytelling through mad stuff we hadn't seen before. What was that thing? What were those things that were like? They were by all accounts Dark Mechanicus priests with all their force fields and stuff and all their dark technology. But were they? What are they?
Yeah,
Where
there
do they
was
come
like
from?
the big giant spheres that seemed to link to something, but then there was also the sort of silver. No, it was like gold giant robot bodies of some kind that could have been men of iron,
Exactly.
but we don't really know. Stuff like that.
Exactly, man.
Yeah.
He created so much intrigue, and that was the thing that was so amazing about that stuff, was he sprinkled in, like when the Marine teleported onto that desert planet and all the statues were of these gigantic, Cthulhian-esque monstrosities. Like, what's that? What's all that about? And that's the thing that I want to see expressed through the game more and more. I want them to layer it. I want them to put some comedy back in it. Just give me some levity. That's what I want out of this game at this moment in time. I feel like they've taken it way too serious. And okay, fair enough. Every Christmas they go, oh, look, it's the Red Gobbo and he's having a laugh. And again, that's cool, I suppose. But like, I don't know, do something interesting with it. Take it in a new direction. Try and do something fun and interesting and create layers. Yeah. Like that's what I want to see from this. From like, I would love it if they just were like, yeah, we're doing all this stuff. And maybe it's a way, I don't think it's got, this really is blue sky thinking, but maybe it's a way that they can sort of dip their toe into the 3D printing side of things and figuring that out, where it's like, we're just releasing 3D printer files for all of these things and creating rules for it, and their Games Workshop sculpts, but they're basically 3D prints. So the idea is that, this is really specialist for very specific people who want to express this type of gameplay or whatever. I don't know. Like I feel like at the moment the game is so one dimensional. It just they need to go utterly bonkers and add something truly remarkable to it.
Yeah, there's which actually just give me another idea for two mad things.
Please. So, you can have two if you like.
The first one is off the back of what you're talking about, the aliens, right? There was a book called, I think, Xenobiologists, and it was the Blackstone Fortress rogue trader. I can't remember his name. It was written in his hand, him documenting all the alien creatures he came across, and that was a Black Library book that they produced. And it's a bestiary done, written as if it's from that world, which is quite interesting. But I guess your take is the tower perspective, but also linking that to actual gameplay. So one way they could do that is actually a new version. So Pine Sky idea number 1, which is the one I just thought about, Blackstone Fortress 2. Because that gave us a bunch of great minis, a bunch of great aliens. Like you got the little spindle spiders, which you can't buy any more of them through Blackstone Fortress. I presume they have 40k legacy rules, which, one thing, I will say is it would be great if 40k Games Workshop supported all the 40k models a bit better for stuff like that. If there's maybe more interesting ways to add it to the army. But yeah, a way of adding in creatures to the game of 40k could be via the medium of a Blackstone Fortress 2, but then also having sort of 40k specific rules, as you say. Here's an alien creature that can pop up in one of your games if you want to, where it's attacking you. You've got to capture it, and it's a race against time between you and your opponents trying to capture its eggs, try and do a blood sample, just survive against the endless swarms of the monsters. Loads of different mission varieties you could do. So you've got Blackstone Fortress as a game in and of itself. You're releasing these cool miniatures, you can collect them, but then there's still ways of playing it in the game that's a bit more than just it's an unaligned unit that you can add to your army for a standard game of 40k, which is pretty dry from a storytelling point of view. So I think your idea of sort of mad missions with monsters is good. The second idea is one I've been banging on about since AOS 2, and that's endless psychic spells for 40k. As I mentioned from one of the stories, which was actually the Tau. Oh God, was it the the Tau book from the last Arcs of Omen series, where it's the Tau are fighting the Orcs and Chaos on the planet, and it was a Farsight, Commander Farsight book. And in that, when they summoned, do you remember there was like this weird portal that basically once blood got spilt on it, it basically summoned a load of, I presume it was blood letters, because it was clearly like a chaos portal of some kind. And there was a literally brilliant description of this like disc of blood raining down on people. And I think visualizing like sort of an endless spell type thing for 40k would be good, partly because as a kid I remember the vortex grenade being like this cool like little template that moved around and pretty much killed anything that it touched. And then a bit later on there was like a dome version of it that you could buy. I think that was like 6th, maybe 7th edition in 40k. So I would love to see that in 40k, like better ways of representing psychic powers, but obviously these or you know, guns and abilities that are more physically manifested in 3D on the tabletop, and those are persistent things on the game. Yes, it's another set of rules. Obviously, it would probably have to tie in with the current psychic rules and stuff like that. But I've always thought that'd be really cool to see visually on the tabletop. And I was really surprised when they didn't do it for 8th edition. I thought that was going to be the big twist of 8th edition, that it was going to be endless spells, because I thought that was such a solid concept from AOS that they should just steal.
I mean, I don't think AOS had introduced endless spells when 8th edition came out, but I do take your point. I think a physical token on the battlefield that represents something going on doesn't necessarily need to be an endless spell, in the sense that we're not manifesting like an ethereal scythe or a big burning head or a wall of ghoulies like they do in Age of Sigmar. But it is true. Like, I think things that leave tangible effects on the table would be more interesting. It would be cool if they brought back things like the vortex grenade, where you lob the vortex grenade and it hangs around. Yeah. You know, it's like, there you go, bop, deal with that. Yeah. You know, because
even because like in Horus Heresy, you have, I can't remember what it is, the quad launcher, Phosphex, yeah. So you have like smoke on the table, or you also have smoke as well as a mechanic you could do. But yeah, the Phosphex could drop down, and that sort of floats around and either blocks line of sight, or it does damage to people when it goes over them. Obviously, you also had vehicles blowing up in previous editions, and people used to custom make like these kind of smoke plumes that could go up from your vehicles because the vehicles got left on the table. Something I do miss indeed. So there are elements like that.
Maybe that's what they should bring back, Phil. Maybe that's the big ask. Maybe we should be vehicles remaining on the table and becoming terrain.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be very cool, I think.
Although that can only work for tanks.
Walkers, you could say as well, could crumple. And but visually representing that is a bit more difficult, unless you had a model you swapped it out with, because all you need is like a kind of scrap heap, right, to be like, this is the dead thing, here it is, or like a crate.
That was the again, going back to like old fantasy. I don't know if they've done this in the old world yet, but they had that template
for the falling giant. Yes, I don't think that's in the current one that I've seen, but yeah, the old falling down giant template I do remember. That was a laugh.
Yeah. But that would be great. Like, I think that's the thing. Like, things... Because again, though, right, I genuinely think, like, sincerely, I genuinely think that 40k would be played best on terrain with more 3 dimensions to it, right? Like, I think if we had kind of a ground level, a subterranean level, like a
trench system,
a lower level
vibe.
Yeah, trench system, and then like an upper level, I think the game would operate better because it creates maybe more ebb and flow. But I do think mechanics that actually could potentially cut off routes to people would be super interesting, because especially now, I think that's the thing, right? Like, I genuinely think the thing that's craziest about 40k that is actually quite a sort of weird cognitive kind of dissonance, not dissonance, but like it's just confusing, right? When you see 40k played now, you see a lot of walls, and then you're basically told when you start interacting with the game that, oh yeah, but those walls aren't really a thing. You can go through them. And it's like, right, okay, that's weird, isn't it? And it does create this weird disconnect sometimes. And I do think that, like, fair enough if you're going to have a system where all the models... Basically, 40k now is mostly played on ruins, and those ruins don't really pose an issue for anything other than a handful of units. So if there were mechanics like what you're saying, like the endless spell type things, but they're like grenades or other kind of defense systems that close off areas of the board, that'd be quite nice, wouldn't it?
Well, you had...
I think they should bring back geomancy, Phil. They should bring back geomancy, where you can pick up terrain and move it.
That would be brilliant. Yeah. Well, but yeah, you had in boarding actions, one of the great terrain pieces in that was the sentry guns that was in one of the Gallo docks. And I was like, that's a fantastic piece of terrain and that could be used. Yeah. It's interesting that in the wild myriads of almost fantasy style alien planets, everyone just has a grey playmat mostly filled with imperial cities. Like, we don't get pools of lava, acid rivers, even things like as simple as a cliff face or a hill. Like, those things aren't seen very often. The old 40k terrain, even of the old classic, polystyrene cactus with red cocktail sticks stuck into it, did a great job of just going, this is a bizarre alien world. And mostly it's, human looking trees, because that's all third parties really do. And Games Workshop doesn't really sell trees anymore. And yeah, sort of city stuff. And I think terrain is one of those things that Games Workshop could do really well, but they never seem to, because firstly, they're never in stock when they do sell them. And two, they're just too expensive for people to really want to invest in them. And I think if they were cheaper and they were always in stock or in stock for a lot more often, their terrain has been great in the past. They've done some really amazing pieces. They have done some alien terrain. And I remember when that came out, we were all a bit puzzled by it because it was a bit too random. Do you remember? It was like the Eldari jungle, I think it was described as. It felt much more like Catachan jungle is how they should have sold it. But yeah, it was like all these spiky plants and terrain pieces for and I think there were some Eldari ruins in there as well, and it kind of looked cool. And that was a proper alien world, but I suspect that piece of terrain just completely bombed because it was one of the ones that never seemed to stick around, and we've never seen it since. But stuff like that is a very cool concept, and I think they maybe need to lean into that sort of stuff more, or at least maybe provide rules for people to play on those terrain pieces, even if they then just tell you to just, make them yourself. Or you go, here's an issue of White Dwarf where there's some cardboard, some flat cardboard to represent a pool of acid that you can have as some form of dangerous terrain or impassable terrain that you can just put on a map. Like, stuff like that would be quite easy for them to do. And because I think we're in a world of 40k now where people like to be told what to do, whereas older editions like either in fantasy or 40k, they literally said in the books, like, house rule stuff. If you want to do something or you've got a better idea than us, just do it. And that was very much how they promoted the game in those earlier editions, whereas now everyone sort of feels like they need permission to do something. And if people only want to play like the official way to play, which is why match play became so standardized. So yeah, I'd love them to embrace that kind of aspect a bit more, where it's like, yeah, cool, do what you want. Here's some rules for things, and we're not actually going to produce models for them. So just make them yourself. Or here's a terrain book on how to scratch build terrain. And, White Dwarf's done a really good job at some of that stuff. They also do great articles on kit bashing and stuff. So it's not like they're averse to doing it. It's just not very visible for the majority of people unless you happen to buy the odd issue of White Dwarf.
Yeah, agreed. There you go. I reckon that probably covers the topic of 40k extensively. So I guess we can move on to talking about Age of Sigmar. We talked about 40k for so long, though, that it almost feels like we should probably transition into the Age of Sigmar segment just for the sake of, podcast
Yeah,
ease.
that sounds
as it
good.
were. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, look, I mean, 40k on the whole, my thing is genuinely looking at 40k right now. I'm just worried. I'm just worried we're just going to have a really, really dull year of yet more, like a couple of codexes and some stuff. And I don't know. I'm intrigued, right? Like I think 40k needs to make some bold plays at the moment. I think they need some interesting stuff adding to it, and I think they need to bring their A game this year to keep people interested. Because I think at the moment, like I suppose this is the thing. Like for people getting into the hobby for the first time, I think 40k is a perfectly good system because ultimately it's probably the easiest it's been in a while to get into. So maybe it's just one of those things that. Maybe more than ever, 40k isn't as much intended for me as it used to be. And maybe that's something that I've just got to get used to. But yeah, I just think that's the thing. I think 40k right now, it's like, there's a lot to love about it, but I just want to see him do something interesting with it and try and give us something that's a little bit more fun. But yeah, we'll see. I think the main thing is just fix some of the problems that are there currently and yeah. And then release Exodites. That's what I should have said, isn't it? The Exodites.
Well, I'm surprised you didn't. Yeah, that would be a pretty cool faction to release, or either as a kill team and you just get one unit, a bit like Corsairs got one unit, and
that would
I love Corsairs.
That wouldn't work for the Exodites.
Well, no, because you've got lots of dinosaur-y type vibe stuff, so yeah, maybe. And that would also be a great way of maybe introducing lots of monsters and alien races, because maybe they're not just riding around on dinosaurs, because obviously they'd have to update the lore, I guess, and they can't just be generic dinosaurs, they've got to be some kind of weird wild alien creatures. So yeah, cool. Exodites could have all sorts of myriad of beastries that they can have to let loose, a bit like the Dark Angels, Dark Elder.
There's a crazy, actually, last out there idea. Put Seraphon in 40k.
Yeah, or I think the one that's often been talked about is Skaven. Skaven in space. That's what you need.
Nah, do the Seraphon, because they're like the space lizards.
Well, they're already quite spacey as it is. And I'm pretty sure the sort of Rogue Trader era did have Slan with guns. So I think, there's a weird precedence for it. So they could go down that route. And I feel like reptilian creatures would be a bit similar to Tyranids, but also if they're humanoid, like lizard men. Yeah, lizards with guns, I think, would probably be quite a novel take. And yeah, lots of sort of, there was that artwork I talked about last episode where it's like a fungi with a gun. Mad stuff like that. Would it sell though, I guess is the question. But I'd love to see it.
Who knows? All right, there we go. Moving on to some AOS chat. Transitional noise. All right, we've talked about Warhammer 40,000, predictions, thoughts, hopes, feelings within the context of 2024. But now it's time to talk about Games Workshop's second most significant gaming system, the Horus Heresy. No. Age of Sigmar, obviously. The gentleman's game. Right, Phil?
Oh, not the old world.
Well, I'm sure that's going to take pride and place pretty soon based on its launch. But you never know, right? It's going to be an interesting year. This is, preordained to be the Age of Sigmar's 4th edition. AOS has been a game that has undergone, at least in my experience, a really tumultuous period. It started out as a game with, stoked in controversy. There was the famous videos of people taking to the streets and burning their armies, their fantasy armies, in frustration and anger at the whole situation. But since then, Age of Sigmar has kind of developed its own following with its own, now unique fan base. And people like ourselves who just really appreciate it for what it is, which is, in my opinion, probably the truest form of what was 8th, 9th edition Warhammer 40,000, and then ultimately 1st, 2nd, 3rd edition Age of Sigmar. The kind of core principles, ideas, and design philosophies of Age of Sigmar are essentially what has sort of informed Warhammer 40,000. In many ways, Warhammer 40,000 8th and 9th edition was Age of Sigmar with a Warhammer 40,000 plugin. And I appreciate that sounds like a bit of an abstraction, but if you play Age of Sigmar and you play 9th edition Warhammer 40,000 or 8th edition 40,000, especially if you had come from previous editions, you really do feel the kind of omnipresence of Age of Sigmar and that system in terms of how certain things resolve, certain kind of core concepts, the way that units move, all these kind of key aspects of the kind of game design philosophy really kind of echo AOS. And as a result, Age of Sigmar 3 at least feels like one of the sort of purest expressions of this, design principle. And has been, in my opinion, a really, really good addition and subsequently game of Warhammer. I think AOS 3 has really won me over. I think it's a fantastic game. And I'm actually genuinely going to be sad to see it go, because I will get out of the way and just say it from the outset. Obviously, we know 4th edition AOS is coming. If the team at Age of Sigmar do something similar to what 40k did and just completely throw everything out and create a whole new game with completely different kind of rules, concepts, etc., I think I'm going to lament the loss of AOS 3, because it's been really good. Like, I think a lot of the design philosophies from like army construction is really good. I think the rules have been really nice. I just think Age of Sigmar 3 is a very, very good game, and I just don't think it needs too much changing to it. But I mean, what do you think, Phil? Do you think we're facing an index edition? Do you think we're going to see Age of Sigmar turn into something else entirely? Are you fearful that they are going to dramatically change it?
I mean, I hope not, because I don't think the game needs it. So, for context, we've been playing Age of Sigmar for pretty much exactly 1 year, right? Because that was we built armies for our doubles tournament in January last year, and we're basically doing the same event this time around. So you've had 1 year of effectively a 3-year game. So, if we had started at the beginning, would we be seeing it creak a little bit and go, oh yes, I can understand why there needs to be changes in particular mechanics, maybe, possibly, because I still feel like we're very much in the learning stage of the game. We played it a fair amount, but not a lot, I would say, or enough to master it. We're still finding our feet. I'm still really enjoying it, though. I obviously have good games and bad games, and there are some sort of gotcha moments that you can have some real feel bads when, just models just get instantly obliterated off the table. And potentially that's more not having come across those things before, and it's like a learning experience about how to deal with those things because you're aware of them existing in the game. So there are some things like that, but overall it's a great system. I wouldn't want them to completely throw the toys out the pram and completely rewrite everything. I don't think that's needed. I don't think people enjoy it. I talked about that Andy Chambers interview recently, and it was like, he was like, one of the things I learned is people don't like learning rules again. Like, don't make change for the sake of change. Only make them when it's absolutely necessary. And I feel like that's where we've been quite vocal about the change between 9th and 10th edition. With 7th and 8th, it was a really big change, but I think most people could understand the need potentially for a change, although retrospectively you could say that was maybe a bad idea because there's a lot of nostalgia for 7th, I would say, or at least that kind of system that is now visualized in Horus Heresy. So yeah, here's the thing, I almost don't want a new edition for AOS at all. I don't think it necessarily needs it, and I think the General's Handbooks do a really good job of keeping the game fresh every year. So for this year we just got another General's Handbook, I would be really happy with that. Or if there was a faction sort of launch box with 2 factions in with that General's Handbook, I'd be like, brilliant. you don't actually need to touch the game, the core rules itself. At least that's my opinion. I don't know how you feel about the system.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think at the moment, like, the things I'd like to see changed in Age of Sigmar, the stuff that I think needs cleaning up is I think they could definitely break down the command phase into a magic phase as well. Like I'd like it to be like command, then magic phase, then movement phase, for example, or then command, movement, magic. Although, to be honest with you, that wouldn't work within the system as it is. But I do think, because magic's in it and it is a phase, but it's all sort of wrapped up in a command phase. That's always the thing that I always say is like maybe break that out a little bit. But other than that, like a genuine.
Yes, just because you do have lots of sub phases within the command phase, and structuring that would be a bit better. So you say, yeah, you could just take the magic phase out and it be its own thing. But I sort of see why they want to wrap everything up into the command phase.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Age of Sigmar doesn't really offer much complexity from a magic phase, right? Like as a magic phase goes, it's just roll 2d6. Did you get higher than the number? Okay, cool, you did it. Now is your opponent's, wizard within 30 of the thing that casted it? Yes. Well, let's see if they stop it. Did they roll higher than you? It's not a particularly complex system, right? It's not like the winds of magic or, those kind of complex psychic systems that they've had in earlier editions of 40k. So in that respect, I do understand the way it's wrapped up and I do get the way it is. But yeah, I think that's the thing. I genuinely think, as the game goes at the moment, it's really good. I don't really see too many issues with it. But I think the greatest strength to Age of Sigmar is the actual books, right? I think the army books is the strength. I think the rules for the factions are super interesting, and the way that they have prioritized +1 to hit, +1 to save mechanics versus rerolls is just massive. There's just it's just better. I think not. I think
it's a nice sea change.
Yeah,
it's it definitely makes a big difference not having loads of rerolls. It sort of makes the game feel a bit quicker, and you just get on with stuff as opposed to rerolling lots of dice or wondering if you're going to reroll stuff because you have the option to reroll. I mean, personally, I'm not a huge fan of the all-out attack and all-out defense, which is effectively a stratagem, a command ability that you can use to get +1 to hit and +1 to save. Just because they're just always used. They're like a bit, but then maybe that's part of the fundamentals of the game is the skill in using them and knowing when to use them and stuff like that. But yeah, personally, they feel like they're too big a thing. Partly, I'm annoyed as a Nighthaunt player. The +1 to save doesn't affect me whatsoever, so I don't get to benefit from half of those abilities. But maybe that's me. But as you say, the army books are really good. I don't want mine to change. What I would like is for some of the units just to be better, or because I think Nighthaunt's quite pretty much near the very bottom of the Meta Watch ranking. So I think some units need to be a bit more useful, whether that's better range, more damage, better AP. I don't know. Like some units just don't perform very well, and I think those things need to improve, and those are the things that I don't like to ever change in balance data slates. They like to change the points of those things so they become cheaper, but they've been pretty consistent in AOS, and I think 40k is pretty much the same, with the exception of a few things where they're like, no, these are the stats and the abilities for this unit, and even if they're not good, we're not changing them for the edition because we want your book and we want your cards to still be valid, and it's just the points that are going to change. So potentially an army book that gives you revised units. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the army abilities. I'm quite happy to keep them. But the units can be the thing that gets tweaked. And then they just repackage that in a nice new book. That'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's sort of interesting is we know that, there is a huge amount of certainty that the 4th edition box set will be a combination of Stormcast Eternals and Skaven. So it's going to be really interesting to see Skaven brought to life in a fully fledged range refresh in AOS. I dare say it's going to be incredible. We've already seen newer sculpts of Skaven plague rats through Underworlds and some other Skaven characters, and just the stuff that Games Workshop are able to do now with their models and the incredible stylistic kind of Skaven miniatures that we've seen. I'm super excited to see what they do with the Skaven. I think the Skaven can be incredible, and I don't doubt that that's what we're going to see from GW. I think the Skaven are going to look utterly immense. But I'm also really interested to see what they're going to do with the Stormcast parts of it, because again, the rumor is that we're going to see a kind of primarification of old Stormcast units, right? So obviously in the lore, they've now moved to this newer, sleeker armor pattern, and the reason for
isn't it Thunderstrike?
Thunderstrike, that's right.
Thunderstrike armor.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say, well, no, you carry on. Dan.
No, please, mate, please. Sorry. For those of you listening, we're dealing with a weird latency because Phil's internet's terrible. So we're working through it.
For whatever reason. It's Thunderstrike armor. I think they merge the armor techniques of the Dwarf God with the Stormcast Smiths to make this new type of armor, but is effectively a much more sort of nice, I would say, true scale, better proportioned armor. And I often look at the Stormcast range because of my Thunder Warriors, all based on the newer Stormcast stuff. So just this week I was looking through the range, and the older sculpts just look so dated already. So you can see like this, they're already firstborn, Sigmar models, for want of a better word. So versus the new ones, which are very Primaris in style, where they're just the detail of the sculpts is just so much, I don't know, better. So interesting. If, as you say, I mean, I've not heard any of it. So if they're updating the older sculpts, they haven't really lasted long at all, because AOS came out in 2010 or 2013 or something.
Yeah.
2013, yeah. So it's not been long at all. So for them to already go,
anyway, whatever it was, it's not long.
Well, like 9 years ago. Yeah, it would be about 2013, 2014, or later. Yeah, so not long at all for those sculpts to. I mean, they look good still, but the proportions just aren't as good as what they've now done. So they've raised the bar, which unfortunately makes those old models, which did look good at the time, just not look as great now. Much like Primaris looking back at Firstborn, but at least with a lot of Firstborn stuff, it was almost like a 20+ year difference. Yeah,
I think. Stormcast definitely stand out within the game of Age of Sigmar because of the sheer size of their range. They are a bloated range versus all of the other factions, and it's fair to say that if they were to expand that range even further with yet more units and miniatures, I think that probably would be a mistake, and I do think that it's only inevitable that they need to add some units to them. But, I think it's probably more beneficial that, similarly to what we're seeing with like Space Marines now, we need to just go back and start redoing older stuff in newer sculpts and all the rest of it. So I think that is the right shout for the Stormcast. And it'd be interesting to see how they try and kind of inject more kind of personality into them and et cetera, et cetera. But I'm okay with it. I think if it's an iterative year for the Stormcast specifically, that's cool. And maybe it shows some promising signs for other ranges, because we've already seen the Iron Jaws get a significant wave of additional content. So they got new Ard Boys, a new Moor Grunter. They also got the newer units and characters. So now the Iron Jaws feel really fleshed out. So when we look at things like Daughters of Cain or Fire Slayers, these really early factions, Blades of Khorne, for goodness sake. I mean, Blades of Khorne
Yeah.
incredibly popular faction, but playing with some very old sculpts now, or very mediocre sculpts, to be fair. So yeah, these factions, could we be seeing more iteration with those guys this time around? I mean, one of the things that's been super awesome about Age of Sigmar is the way that they have added and innovated and created incredible armies. I mean, this edition of Age of Sigmar saw the reimagined Seraphon, which have been utterly incredible. The reimagined Flesh Eater Courts, which have been amazing. Same thing with the Cities of Sigmar. So these were all armies that kind of existed already, but now they've been kind of updated and turned into these really amazing, sort of more fully fleshed out ideas. So I'm really hopeful that like AOS 4, rather than just being like, okay, and now we're going to give you new sculpts for Blades of Corn and we're going to give you some new Fireslayer stuff, although I think that is necessary and important. I think it would be cool if we started also seeing, it felt very early on in Age of Sigmar, all the factions were new, fresh, and interesting a lot of the time.
Yes. Yeah. I hope they do that. And, I think one of the ones that is, I don't know if it's rumoured, but I think it's maybe on people's wish list is actually Chaos Dwarves, because they haven't been in the game since Warhammer Fantasy. It would be great to see them reimagined in the AOS setting. I think Hashut as the god has been teased, and there are a couple of like Chaos Dwarf minis in the Warcry and Underworld's warbands. Maybe just Warcry warbands, actually. So stuff like that does exist out there, and that as a range would be great to see, because I love the old Big Cat versions from Games Workshop. I also loved the Forge World redo that they did as well. So it'd be awesome to see their take on that classic range. And yeah, like you said, if they do some completely brand new out the box factions, that'd be awesome. I still feel like as Caldron Overlords were dwarves in the sky, their arch nemesis is either Skaven or goblins / orcs. So sky versions of them, I think, would be quite cool. So you can have sort of space pirate battles. So either goblins or Skaven as like a mini faction floating around in the sky would be awesome. Actually, someone did a really cool conversion, like Army, where they did do it with orcs as Caldron Overlord proxies, and they had they sculpted an inflatable squig that was like the balloon that was lifting up their pirate ship. Phenomenal. Like something like that would be mad, but also awesome to see. Yeah, so I'd look forward to seeing what they do sort of range wise, because I think the AOS minis are always really stunning, and for the most part always like hit it out.
Totally.
A lot more consistently than 40k, but maybe that's because we're much more ingrained in 40k, so we're a bit more critical of what they do. But yeah, a lot of the AOS stuff is always a home run, so to speak.
I mean, I'd love to see, I'd like to see some evil elves, like elves that aren't actually sided with. The
Order faction.
Death elves would be cool, as in all elves that are actually in the Death faction. That would be super interesting. So maybe some kind of necromancy style elf army would be kind of interesting. Similarly, like you said, Chaos Dwarves would be cool. Destruction is in a good spot at the moment, but it definitely needs some more factions. I think at the moment, like Gloomspite Gits are amazing, Auric Warclans are amazing. Sons of Behemoth are really kind of they're in an okay spot, but they're really basically two boxes, right? Like they're basically the mega gargant and the little gargants, and
but I mean that's the same with knights though. Like what else can you do with that unless you either give them little people to run around at their feet to that they use as slaves or whatever, Lilliput style, like running around, or you just have a different size of giant to, it's either smaller or bigger than the two that they've already got. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know what you could do with them other than, a different size giant, which seems a bit odd. I mean, maybe that is what they would do. But I'd love to see, almost like a nature-based destruction.
Mm.
Like, obviously, you've got things like, because wasn't there like not the cave troll? What was it? There was like the orc idol, which was just like living rocks. So yeah, an angry mountain that is just living and just rampaging around, or I don't know, something like that. Like I'm sure they could go off the wall with these.
Yeah,
ideas.
like, do an army of rock
what
biters
we
from the
do.
Never-Ending Story.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, something along those lines would be pretty cool. I do agree with you, though. I think Destruction's definitely got room to breathe. I think there's a lot of creativity that could be expressed within, the Destruction faction. Again, I like the armies that are there within it. I mean, I suppose what's likely to happen in AOS 4 is that the Auric War Clans become individual books, and we almost certainly see the removal of Savage Orcs or Bone Splitters, as they're called now. I think Bone Splitters are probably going away. So we're probably going to find ourselves with Army Book Iron Jaws and Army Book Cruel Boys. I think that's only inevitable. I think Cruel Boys are definitely due a significant Wave 2 release, essentially. So I think that's going to be super cool. So that will really kind of flesh that out. And yeah, I mean, I don't mind the idea of like cunning orcs and Iron Jaw orcs. I think those two are perfectly reasonable. But the Bone Splitters just sort of feel, kind of.
It doesn't really, as you say, the two archetypes are, cunning and brutal and cunning, and those are the Aurochs and the Cruel Boys. So you don't need another type of orc. They could take the Bone Splitters and kind of reimagine them and do like a complete range refresh on them, and maybe take them in a slightly different direction, and that would be quite interesting.
That could be what you were talking about more with the nature side of things, like orcs that are much more kind of like, I don't know, like the idea that like they do worship these stone idols, or these stone idols are kind of manifestations of their gods, and they're kind of more of a religious kind of cult of orcs, where they're more pious, I suppose. Like the idea that they're, that they're a little bit more obedient, almost, I suppose. So it's not like they're just kind of evil, sinister. They're much more sort of, I don't know. They've got, so again, you could probably express that in interesting ways in the game with them, because they're less about kind of raw brutality or vicious cunning. They're more about, I don't know, like obedience, and they have more kind of discipline, almost, like the idea that you can do something interesting with that. But yeah, I think Destruction needs a little bit of love, but I think in all likelihood what we're probably going to see is just a break out of the Aurochs, and then maybe they'll give us like one extra faction in Destruction, but I doubt it. I mean, Death as well. I mean, Death is a very, very bare bones selection in a minute. So you got Flesh Eater Courts, which obviously got a really meaningful update recently, and that's great. Night Haunts, which feel like they never really know what to do with them, but they are there and they are cool, and I'm hopeful that they really do them justice in the 4th edition of the game. The Bone Reapers, which essentially were the kind of new cool, like Tomb King style army.
Skeleton Warriors.
So they, I mean, Bone Reapers at the time of their release, I was kind of interested in, but the more I think the problem is I've joined the game at a time where the Bone Reapers are a bit of a consistently strong force. But they also, the more I sort of see them, the less imaginative they feel. So I'm sort of almost underwhelmed by Bone Reapers at this point. But I do love them. Like, I mean, I like a lot of the sculpts rather. But yeah, for me, Bone Reapers just don't really, they're not really doing anything.
They're the less interesting one. Like the Soul Blight Grave Lords, a really interesting faction, but I feel like they're very similar to Auric War Clans, where they're several sub factions put together in one under the guise of vampires. And it's like you've got the kind of the wolf style vampires, and then you've got the more kind of classic style. But it was interesting, obviously, looking back at the old Warhammer Fantasy stuff, because I was going through my old, I think, 4th and 5th edition kind of books. And there you've got like classic, like just a skeleton army that's more sort of generically raised by, you've got the necromancer death sort of faction, and then you've got the vampires, and there's a lot of crossover. So yeah, I'd almost like to see more leaning into the necromancy vibes. And I guess I was going to say kind of classic skeletons, but it's like I guess you've kind of got that in Ozzy Bone Reapers as like the weird sort of new direction for them. But and I guess for Old World, that's where I'll get my random plastic bare bone skeletons with no bits on them. But it's kind of nice to see them, and I'd like to see a bit more of a traditional version of them appear in AOS as well.
Yeah, I like the idea of like a Death Eater type army, like an idea of like maybe like a Cthulhu-esque sort of, squid type,
Well, sea monstery type things would be good. I've always wanted I'd say Vampire Coast, but in Total War they did the sort of dead pirates, almost like LeChuck
cool,
from
actually. Yeah, that would be awesome.
From like Monkey Island, sort of just like zombie pirates, which is, I guess it's a bit of a cliche now thanks to Pirates of the Caribbean, but that kind of amalgamation of nautical vibes. There's no nautical army. Oh, I say that, you've got obviously the
Idenef.
The fishermen, the Idenef, but they're just under the water. It's like, I want more nautical pirate sailor themed army, and that would be a great foil for the Idenef, because obviously then you've got 2 sea factions. Likewise, you need 2 air factions with another sky pirates. So yeah, those are all options, I think.
Yeah, I do really like the idea of like a deaf seafaring like faction, like the idea, like you say, like the Davy Jones style kind of thing. But again, you could add in this kind of like, again, that kind of Cthulhu-esque element where it is like they are of death, but they also feed on death. So they basically imprison and ultimately seize, like, and they could have like a massive rivalry with like the Night Haunts in particular, because they basically, feed on ghosts and souls and all that kind of stuff. Like the idea that they're like more of a, because it's the idea that like,
that'd be like a rival for Nagash's souls, which is quite
like the idea that they eat and consume and basically devour souls. So the idea that like they're like the carrions that feed on death, as it were. So they could become more of a kind of reapery style thing, which could be really interesting. And then you can add more like wraiths but by wraiths I mean more kind of, these kind of like, these things that feast on souls and stuff. I think that'd be really interesting as an idea, just to kind of delve into that side of it would be cool. And again, if you could theme that around, like, again, a nautical theme, I think that'd be awesome. Like, if you could do something really interesting with that whole kind of combination, that would be wicked. And again, to your other point, though, to see like a destruction faction or a death faction or even a chaos faction that leaned more into the air side of things. Like, again, like Stormcast Eternals are always leveraging like dragons and stuff, right? That's always like their thing. And it feels like Chaos have kind of lost the dragon edge over the years, which is a shame because like back in the day of fantasy, Chaos had amazing dragons, big 2-headed. It's like, where's that going? Like, give me some of that noise again, bring that back into the fray. Or give me like a Chaos Dragon army where it's literally, like evil dragons or dragons possessed by the Chaos gods would just be phenomenal. Like that kind of stuff would be awesome. So yeah, like I'd love to see that sort of stuff coming to life in Age of Sigmar. But that's the thing with AOS. It's just sort of, I think we're at this really interesting point with the range now where, say, for example, they give us like a buff to like, they say they expand Fire Slayers, say they expand Cadron Overlords, say they expand these ranges and add more flavor to it, more depth to it. I think that's going to be really good for the game overall. But I think, again, it's going to be a tightrope walk because we don't want them to go too far. I think one of the strengths of AOS is that everyone's armies are relatively limited. I mean, even now with like Iron Jaws, since they've expanded it, they've only really given, like I think Iron Jaws in total have got 2 different battle line units I've got, and then in terms of others, it's not huge, it's not vast. I think there's like 9 different things I can pick from, which is, it's all right.
I totally agree, because I would say one of the strengths of AOS is the smaller size of army. So if you wanted to go, I want to collect one of every unit, it's nowhere near as bad as a lot of the 40k armies are in terms of the sheer volume of stuff. And I feel like the not undoing of AOS, but what will eventually happen is they keep releasing Warcry warbands and Underworld's warbands that will get included in battle tomes, kind of rightfully so, because they previewed that new Nighthaunt one and it looks pretty cool. So I'll probably pick it up for my Nighthaunt army. You'll just end up with this weird bloat of the game will end up with every faction has 5 or 6 units that have come from Underworlds and Warcry, and they will almost make up, eventually, in theory, the majority of every battle tome, unless they eventually cap these things. And, I like the idea that every army has a theme and a play style, and not every army has to have absolutely every tool in the box to play a game, and that you do limit your play style by the army that you pick. It's great that you have options, but sometimes you don't want them to be able to do absolutely everything.
No, I totally agree.
And yeah, that's my worry, that AOS will sort of bloat over the years. Unfortunately, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because some of the best sculpts and minis, well, obviously come from AOS in general, but come from the Warcry warbands and the Underworld warbands, because they're always phenomenal, and they're really like creative and colourful and quite interesting. Like the Executioner one for Nighthaunts was amazing, and it's like, I think the only way they get around to limiting that in battle tomes is to either eventually not include it, or what it feels like they currently do is they just make them not that good, or they're very like points expensive. So competitively wise, you'd never include them in a game, but if for fun friendly games, you'll do it because it just seems cool, because they are. So it's a bit, it's an odd one where it's like, it's great that they do them, but at some point they need to stop doing them for every army. Like once every army's got 1 or 2, it's like, cool, okay, stop it there. But Underworlds and Warcry are like these beasts that can't be stopped, and that they're just going to keep churning them out every year because that's how those game systems work. Unless they eventually go, the sales in these have dried up. But they won't, because people buy them probably more for AOS than the actual games themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just looking at
speculation on what.
Yeah, well, indeed. I was looking at all of the death factions, and it's interesting, because Soulblight Gravelords have quite a considerable amount of stuff that they can pick between. But they're by far and away the biggest range in death. I mean, when you look at things like the Nighthaunt, for example, you realize that, like, once you sort of extract characters from the equation, you're basically talking Craven Throne Guard, Bladegeist Revenants, Chain Rasps, and
it's probably like
Reapers.
6 sort of infantry units.
Oh, Reapers and Banshees. and Spirit Host. Oh, and Harridans. There you go. And then
and Hex Wraiths as well, or for like cavalry.
Oh yeah,
stuff.
the Hex Wraiths for the cavalry. Yeah, and that is actually quite a lot, but not like crazy,
Yeah, but it's like they've got they've got kind of one shooting unit with the Craven Throne Guard, and yes, there are a couple of units that can also have shooting attacks, but they're like the one unit with crossbows, right? You've got one cavalry unit in the form of the Hex Wraiths, plus you've got the Black Coach and a couple of character sort of units that are cavalry based, and then everything else is just sort of infantry with close combat weapons. And it's like, obviously there's not much artillery in a lot of the newer factions. I think they've really toned down shooting, and maybe that's a deliberate distinction that they've done from AOS from the outset to not be like fantasy with loads of cannons and stuff like that, because pretty much every army had a decent amount of artillery and fantasy, it seems. And yeah, they don't have big monsters, but they've got the black coach and stuff like that. So they do have a very sort of focused sort of play style, I think, and sort of a lot of limitations. And they could be like, yeah, give us more shooting, or give us different types of cavalry units or different types of wizard units. I mean, there's lots of stuff they could expand on, but it's like, do they need to? No, I think is the answer. Should they? Probably not. Although, you know, they've just done the Underworlds one, not Underworlds, Warcry. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays and will fit into that army.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? In terms of what I want for Age of Sigmar in the year 2024, I want them to mostly leave the rules alone. I accept they've got to make change for the sake of change, because Games Workshop need to keep the sales train rolling, and a lot of people will, you know, be excited about the prospect of a new edition of Age of Sigmar, and great for them. And, you know, it's not that I'm not excited for a new edition of Age of Sigmar. I'm just worried, based on my recent 40k experience, that we could be looking at a negative overall.
Yeah, I mean, if we have to learn rules for a brand new game, having just, you know, learned rules for AOS, that would be quite frustrating for us as sort of new players to the game. So I hope they don't do that, but I don't feel like it's particularly needed. Personally, I would have liked them to have done like a bigger expansion to the game, like, you know, Siege, because that was something that was quite prevalent in fantasy, like as an expansion, like sort of siege warfare with, you know, cool castles and terrain and stuff like that. That I would have loved to have seen in AOS. And to be fair, they have recently started putting some rules in White Dwarf that kind of cover that sort of stuff. But that could have been like a standalone expansion with a whole bunch of like terrain kits themed around the various factions that people could have bought into. But, you know, because they did that for Chaos in AOS 1, I think it was, with the kind of Chaos Castle. So maybe they just don't sell. And that was potentially why they're not going to do something like that. But I feel like they could have done something to string out the edition for a couple more years, and I would have been more than happy with that, because I feel like the release cycle is always too soon for these editions. 3 years isn't really enough time. I'd like 5 years. So have a couple of, you know, we've had this year being the campaign year in amongst a couple of the battle tomes, but I would have, you know, quite happily had another campaign next year, or some form of expansion to the game. You know, hopefully wouldn't change it too drastically, but just add some, you know, narrative elements to it, or other ways of playing the game potentially. But I feel like the problem is the General's Handbook and Chapter Approved do too good a job at updating the game year to year that you don't need additions every 3 years.
Yeah, I can only agree with that statement, mate. I think that's the wild thing about all of it, really, is like we're at sort of a period where, like, in a way, these new editions aren't really required, but they are desired, I suppose. Like, we were all excited about 10th edition, right? Like, that's the thing. We went through the 9th edition cycle, and 9th edition as a game system was so weird that everyone was just super excited for this new 10th edition. You know, I'd say now people are relatively, you know, I think people have got the measure of 10th edition now, and people who like it love it, and people who are indifferent to it probably don't feel one way about it or the other. But the point is that I think, yeah, with AOS, I feel like, I don't know, I'm not really, I've spoken to a lot of AOS players, and I've not really encountered too many of them that are like, oh, this game's no good. Like, we want a new edition desperately. It feels very different. It feels like this community is broadly happy with where they're at, you know, and then it doesn't feel like they're looking for the next edition.
Yeah, I feel like the buy-in, I think that because they often talk about the double turn concept, and it's like that is the thing that puts people off the game, and you either kind of love it or you hate it. So maybe that would be the thing that they might decide to get rid of.
They won't do it though, because it's so much of their identity. Like, the game has defined itself on that mechanic, right?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So potentially,
would you get rid of it, Phil? Do you think the double turn is a problem?
Well, we were talking about it last week, right? And I sort of feel like I don't think it's necessarily a problem once you know how to sort of play around it. It can be frustrating when it happens, but I think it often almost makes the game rather than breaks it. But I feel like if you were to get rid of it, you wouldn't just go to I go, you go to I activate a unit, you activate a unit, and hopefully the lower model count or lower unit composition in your army in comparison to 40k makes it much more viable as a way of playing the game via properly alternating actions rather than whole army actions. But that would really change the game.
Oh yeah, they're not going to do that. They're not going to move it to that kind of bolt action system, for example, or even like, yeah. I mean, I think it'd be fun if they did. I think that bolt action system is really cool, and I think Age of Sigmar could sustain it. But the reality is now is Age of Sigmar's fans wouldn't like them to change that mechanic because they like the double turn. So like, you know, it's what they're used to. It's an identifying feature of AOS. But it is funny because like, it is the most consistent criticism of Age of Sigmar. I think it's a really unimaginative criticism of Age of Sigmar, but it's the one I hear the most when I talk to people when I'm playing 40k, and they're saying like, "Oh, how are you getting on with it?" And I happen to mention that I've been playing a bunch of AOS recently. They always go, "Oh, I couldn't do it. That double turn sounds ridiculous." And I'm always like, "It's not that big a deal, guys." Like.
Yeah, but that is the only reason why I think they might do it, because they want to try and get a wider audience for the game, and they feel like that's too much of a stumbling block, even though it actually isn't that bad when you play it after the first couple of games, where you're like, "What madness is this?" But yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I say, it often helps you save the game, or it just ends it quicker when you're on a downward spiral anyway. So it just sort of resolves the game quicker when it needs to, and makes it last longer when it also needs to, if that sounds right.
It feels like with AOS it's very difficult to have a game go crazy long in it. Like, I admit you can do, but like I mean, you and I as complete novices playing at the AOS doubles this time last year, you know, we never ran long, right? We never even got close to running long. It was always that thing where it was...
Well, wait till me and Tim play this time round. It might all change.
Fair.
Especially since because this time we're leaning much more into endless spells and magic, whereas before we didn't really bother with any of that. I mean, I had a couple of wizards, but nothing to the extent I'll be doing this time around. So, but yeah, normally they all seem much quicker games than, because doubles 40k games go on for a really long time, quite often, because you have to do things in the right order. You can't, you know, play the person opposite you while your mate plays the person opposite them. It's everything sort of activation specific. And then plus you've got the discussions of tactics and stuff between you and your partner and stuff, and that slows the game down. So yeah, doubles games I think inherently take longer than normal games, but I would say probably AOS takes less time than 40.
Oh, for sure. I mean, one of the things about AOS is that, you know, the game just sort of speeds up as it goes along because more stuff dies and everything's like a lot. It's just it's just quite a bit. Yeah, I think it's just a bit quicker in that sense. But anyway, I think it's going to be a really interesting year for AOS this year. I think it's definitely turning a lot of heads. I think people are really observing the fact that the miniatures in AOS are exceptional quality, and that's a compelling reason to want to sort of jump in. But again, if you're a 40k player and you're listening to the segment, I think the most compelling argument I can give you on Age of Sigmar is that it is genuinely a really, really fun system that has like a lot of depth, and in a way. And not that I feel like this is a thing that needs to be kind of promoted on it, but it's just I just think it's better as a competitive system than 40k is. I feel like 40k sort of struggles under the weight of competitive play, whereas Age of Sigmar seems to just lend itself to it better. And Age of Sigmar just feels like it's just more interesting from a kind of gameplay design perspective. Like when we played the other week and you had a lot of stuff go wrong on it, you still had options that could have turned it into a victory condition for you even till the end.
Oh yes, it was almost a draw. Admittedly, we spent probably about 20 minutes strategizing how we could make that happen, and I failed like the 2 dice rolls that I needed to go right to make that a possibility, which was unfortunate. But as you say, when we lost, it was only by like a couple of points, and wasn't as bad as it could have been, despite my main wizard and warlord getting killed turn 1 by my own spell. Thanks, Richard. Which is he'll love, and other things going wrong and terrible dice rolls happening. Still, and weirdly, the double turn never even happened in that game. Me and Tim went second, hoping to get the double turn. We just never rolled high enough to make it happen. So. The double turn happens a lot less than you assume would happen in that game.
Well, indeed. And then I suppose conversely, it's every chance that double turns could happen every turn in the game. Well, turns.
Well, every other turn, I guess. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I don't think I've had two double turns happen in a game yet, but in theory it could happen.
Yeah, exactly. Of course it could. It could. Anyway, yeah. So, my hopes and expectations for Age of Sigmar in the year 2024 is I hope that, I hope that we see some interesting releases within it. I'm excited to see some new armies, but I'm also excited just to see what this new edition has in store for us. Look, at this moment in time, without wanting to sound ridiculous, I've got a lot of faith in the team who work on Age of Sigmar. I think they've got some interesting ideas. I think they are given a lot more freedom than the 40k team. I think, AOS being much less of a revenue driver for the business. I think they're just allowed to be way more experimental with it and way more kind of, they can do just interesting things with it. And I think that's going to be the really cool thing about AOS 4 is that I think it's going to be a really, I just really hope it's going to be a really good game. And because, AOS 3 has really charmed me. And it's wild, right?
You don't want them to muck it up.
Yeah, man.
Basically.
Because this is the thing, genuinely, Age of Sigmar 1 was terrible. I hated it. I literally started playing it and went, this game is awful. I want nothing to do with it. I played 5 or 6 games of it and I was just like, no, not for me. Love the Iron Jaws range. I was very tempted when they came along just because they were just gorgeous. But other than that, I was just like, this game just isn't for me. So the fact that AOS 3 has won me back as hard as it has is, a real testimony to just actually how good it is. But what's your, thoughts or hopes for 2024 for AOS? Is there anything that stands out to you, or are you just excited to see what comes?
Game-wise, I don't really want them to rock the boat too much. Just the quality of life improvements here and there would be great. Streamlining a couple of bits, or at least presentation of the rules, I think, because I remember reading the rules and learning them was still a bit complex, despite them having lots of nice layouts and quality of life stuff. The products that they do for AOS are always pretty top-notch quality, and they are always above and beyond better than the 40k stuff. The General's Handbooks come with cool tokens. They're hardback, they're ring-bound. They've got a little elastic band that you can use as a bookmark. On the back page, though, all I want on that, in addition to the stuff that they've got, because they've got almost like a quick reference sheet, but they are missing heroic actions, I think, on that. And that's the one thing I'm always looking up to just try and double-check, even though they're quite easy to remember, I think, if you played regularly. But the back page quick reference sheet could be, have a few more extras on there. It'd be quite handy. I kind of would like them to stop being wedded to Stormcast Eternals in every single edition box.
Yeah, agreed.
I would love it if we got Skaven plus a different faction. That would be awesome. And I think that would potentially breathe a bit of life to the game, rather than it just feeling like Stormcast are the Space Marines of the edition and that they're the selling point, even though that is sort of what they're there for, to be. But I don't know. They're good. They're lovely. I love the sculpts. I use them in my 40k models. The new ones are really good, but I just don't see them being as popular as Space Marines. It feels like they are, and it feels like they're constantly pushing it. But whenever we go to events, I never really see anyone have them in the same numbers that you go to an event and see 40k players play Space Marines. So yeah, if they're at least just doing a range refresh of some of the older sculpts for this edition, I can live with it. But I would much rather just see a brand new faction come out. That would be cool. Yeah, and I feel like, I mean, here's the thing: Fantasy never had that. Never had the iconic sort of Space Marine army that they always did every year. It was always 2 different boxes, so it was great to see Britannian and Tomb Kings. And I would almost, just like to see that for AOS 4, but yeah, probably won't happen.
Yeah, so at the LVO, the Age of Sigmar's tournament had around 380 players. So biggest Age of Sigmar tournament. Of those 380 players, according to this anyway, 27 of them were Stormcast Eternals players.
Yeah, I guess that is skewed because it's competitive players, right?
Yeah.
So it's, I don't know what, the average, hobby club in your town might look a bit different. Because you might get some casual players and stuff like that.
Of the people who play Age of Sigmar in the club that I go to, none of them play Stormcast. I
mean, we know, Garfield from RFW, he plays Stormcast. Yeah. I guess Richard has technically bought some Stormcast recently, but he hasn't played them yet. But yeah, otherwise we've all gone, Soulblight Grave Lords has been the most popular faction out of our friendship group, at least, because I know 3 people that play it, because they're just stunning models, and I think they're like, I don't know, they're just an iconic faction that have years more worth of history and lore from the fantasy ported over that Stormcast just don't have. And if you were to do anything on a regular basis, I guess, I've always said Cities of Sigmar would be the one to pick, because, they're the everyday humans. So I'd like to see them be the mainstay, and the Stormcast be a little bit more special and unique and seen slightly less. But yeah, their range is big enough. Could they keep expanding on it? I mean, I guess they could, but I don't think they should.
Yeah, I think that's it. I feel like Cities is a better representation of the world of Sigmar. I feel like if you want to sort of follow a kind of baseline faction, I think Cities is a more interesting option, because there are Cities of Sigmar across all of the realms, and also, they have all these different flavors, so you can expand on them, but also you can start to really lean into the elves and the dwarves and
the different races.
It feels like a better choice. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're not going to stop peddling the Stormcast stuff. And yeah, I think it just sort of speaks to the quality of the game that there's just so many like other options out there. So look, I mean, this is the thing. I feel like I definitely agree with you. I'd love it for them to sort of step away from poster child Stormcast, but at the end of the day, I think they're just going to continue to bang that drum. And here's the thing, right? This is going to be the first edition of AOS since first edition, which I will be purchasing the rules for day one. So then the question becomes, will I buy the box set, and will I find myself with Stormcast Eternals in my collection?
Interesting. But then that comes down to, if you want anything from that box, it's such a value proposition, let's say, that it's almost stupid not to. We had that same discussion with Leviathan when that came around. It was like, even if you just want the rules and 1 or 2 of those models, it's almost cheaper just to buy the box than to try and get the book and a couple of those units separately. So yeah, it depends if you like the look of a Skaven or the Stormcast. Potentially, I might want some of those Stormcasts for my 40k army I'm converting. Hopefully not, because I feel like I've got enough bits and pieces floating around already to get that army complete, but I'm sure I could be swayed to come up with a brand new unit of something and convert it into something suitable to Thunder Warriors if a Sculpt's cool. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do for it.
For sure, man. Like, really interesting. I mean, it's an exciting year for AOS, and I think we'll see what comes through. But I reckon that'll probably do on that particular topic. We're going to move on now to whatever it is that comes next, which we think is the outro. But I guess you'll find out momentarily. Transitional noise. All right, everyone, it's the end of the show, although you know better than that. It's that bit where me and Phil essentially do a similar kind of podcast to other podcasts and talk a load of nonsense that we want to talk about for about an hour or so. Although maybe not an hour this time, because we're time poor this time around, aren't we, Phil?
Exactly. We're all quite busy. Although I say that, more you than me. Preparing for the doubles weekend ahead. I mean, my army's all good to go for the Age of Sigmar doubles at Warhammer World that we're doing. You're still not midway through painting, but nearly there. Finishing touches. Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the final throes. I mean, I could very comfortably put this stuff down on a tabletop and no one would deny that it is painted, because all the bits are the colours that they should be. They're just not done to the standard that is what I'm shooting for. But just got the skin of 10 more brutes to go, and then once that's done, everything will be to a standard that is my liking, which is pretty awesome. Brilliant. Yeah.
Man.
And
yeah.
I luckily didn't have to paint anything. The only thing I was tempted to paint was your Purple Sun Endless spell that was getting added into Tim's portion of my doubles list. But luckily, Sean, who you're doubling up with, has a painted Purple Sun, and it's based in the same style as my base because I doubled with him last time. So I'm just going to borrow his instead, which is a bit cheeky. But, you know, I don't have a Purple Sun. Only you do.
Well, and Sean.
Well, yes, and Sean, so I'll just use it. That's fine. I've got a great idea for a Purple Sun. I want to convert up at some point down the line.
Fair. But no, I'm excited for Warhammer World. I always enjoy it. I like AOS at the moment. It's super fun. Enjoy the doubles format. Really excited to be playing with Sean. Haven't played with Sean in a doubles since 7th edition Warhammer 40,000, I want to say.
Oh, wow. That is a long time.
Yeah. Me and Sean last played in a doubles. Yeah, I want to say it was 7th edition 40k. He took Imperial Knights and I took Craftworld Elder. And we had this amazing moment where my Wraith Knight killed an opposing enemy knight, only for that knight to spill forwards into Sean's knight, blowing up Sean's knight, and then Sean's knight fell backwards into my Wraith Knight, killing my Wraith Knight. It was incredible.
Oh, because this was the days of the... was it the Apocalypse Blast marker? And that it would scatter? Yeah, I remember, yeah. Cool.
So Imperial Knights, if deployed too close together, could daisy chain. Very, very bad.
Yes, I mean, you did used to get that with vehicles happening, but not quite as easily to the same extent due to, damage tables and stuff like that. So, yeah, pretty epic.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was one of those things where, like, literally my Wraith Knight just sort of went, "Pop-chow!" And then all of a sudden, it and two other knights all went up in smoke. And then our opponents, like Death Watch, would just sort of sit there like, "Oh, okay. Fine." And it was just like, it just turned into an absolute mess. I used to love that about older editions of 40k. Some mad stuff used to happen back then. I appreciate it would probably be a feel bads in the modern context, and it wouldn't be consistent enough for tournament play, but good gosh, it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite I think law accurate with how things would happen, at least with Titans on the tabletop. Maybe not necessarily Knights, but most of those things blow up when they die, so it makes perfect sense.
Well, exactly. It took a big old distortion cannon or whatever it's called, the big Wraith cannon to the face. But it was clearly, set upon its forward momentum. So after its noble pilot had been, utterly obliterated, the thing just kind of strolled forwards while going nuclear, and then Sean's valiant Imperial Knight was kind of stood in the way, preparing for the thing to kind of charge towards it and was ready to kind of defend against it. But as this thing just sort of smashes into Sean's Knight, it then, creates like a chain reaction. And, obviously the momentum was such that it knocked him back into my own Wraith Knight, who, again, also caught it in the face. So, yeah, it was lovely. It was a great time. Again, those memorable moments, you see. I love the old games for that. I'll tell you as well. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say I actually had some memorable moments in a game of 40k just last weekend.
Oh, really? Do tell. I played in a tournament last weekend, and you played against some random geezer from around where you live.
Yes, yeah. He's normally in Cambridge at uni, but he was briefly back. So we had some game. We played 2 games of 1,000 points on Sunday.
Nice.
I was doing my Thunder Warriors. I just managed to make to 1,000 points with a Vindicare Assassin thrown in, and he had some Tau. So one of the interesting moments was with the Vindicare Assassin. I was targeting, I think it was his broadside, so a big sort of vehicle unit with a big gun that was absolutely mincing in the first game every single one of my units because it was doing a ton of damage and I couldn't do much about his, I think, the rail rifle. Anyway, so I think this was turn 1 of the second game. I got to go first, so I was like, I'll position my Vindicare Assassin so I could shoot at it. I used the once per game ability to do Shield Breaker so he wouldn't get an invuln save. But I then rolled a 6 to hit, which scored a critical hit, which meant I turned the 3 damage rifle weapon into 6 damage. But then I rolled a 6 to wound, which triggered the devastating wounds ability, bypassing the invuln save that he could have had if it wasn't for the fact I did Shield Breaker. So I just outright killed him in one shot. And I was like, wow, that was pretty lucky. Weirdly, I rolled a 6 and a 6 in the previous game as well, but it wasn't quite as impactful in terms of one-shotting a unit off the table.
Amazing. I mean, that sounds pretty fantastic, to be fair.
Yes. He had his revenge, though, because in that game I was charging in my Terminators to one of his other units, his commander. And he managed to roll, I think, 2 6s in Overwatch as I was charging in, and he had sustained hits 1 or 2. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been sustained hits 2. So he did 4 hits, I think it was. Or maybe it was 6 if it's sustained hits 2. I can't remember. He did a ton. Anyway, he completely wiped out my 3-man squad of Terminators in Overwatch. I was a bit shocked by that result. But again, it was quite a memorable moment. So we both had some good, interesting dice rolls, basically, in that game.
Amazing. It's always good when you get the memorable moments, though. I do think that's really the stuff that shines. I mean, you, me, Richie and Tim did some practice for AOS, so there was definitely some fun, memorable moments in that as well. Less fun for you, Phil. You didn't... memorable in a bad sort of way.
Yes, I was on the receiving end where I'd cast the Purple Sun from my wizard, but Richard had a once per game ability where he could try and effectively dispel it, but in doing so turned it to be his endless spell, and then then he could move it, and he just basically stuck it right next to the wizard that had summoned it originally and happened to roll a 1, which means it just auto dies. And I was like, oh great, okay. Thanks very much.
And then in the next turn, while it was still under his control, he removed yet another of your characters.
Oh, yes. He took my other... Yeah, he rolled a 1 again for my other character. So, yeah, the Purple Sun can be very good at just killing characters. I guess you've got a 1 in 6 chance of it happening. Yeah. But when that happens and it happens kind of consistently, it can be a bit frustrating, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely something. I mean, I think... I think it was quite funny, but at the same time, it was definitely, memorable in that sense. But, man. So, obviously, going over the Warhammer World this weekend. So if you're listening to this on Saturday or Sunday, we will be there. We will probably try and do some kind of wrap-up thing on Patreon or something. We did that last time around, so that'd be cool. Or we'll just chuck it into a segment next time around. But yeah, so I'm going with Sean. He's got the Soulblight Gravy Lords, and they're going to be joined by my Iron Jaws. And Phil is rocking the Nighthorns and is teaming up with Timothy and his Maggotkin and Nurgle. So that's going to be super fun. And Tim has actually painted some summonable units, Phil. I mean, imagine that.
Ooh, yes. Some Nurglings, isn't it?
Yes,
he's also got
Nurglings.
some
Plague Bearers.
Plague Bearers as well. So he's got a couple of choices. And then we're
He's
also
not doing
joined
the
by...
meta thing and just spawning loads of Bow Pipers.
I know, that would be fun. But I guess that's quite expensive model-wise. We're also joined by Richard. He's coming. And RFW's Danvers from
the one and only
group of ours. So he's doing Soulblight Graveyard. And then Richie's rocking his Saves the Darkness Chaos.
I always enjoy how you call Soulblight Gravelords Soulblight Graveyard. It's
do I say it all the time? Oh, yeah, it's because graveyard makes sense. Like, that's what you think, and I think that's why they've done that kind of pun name, right?
That's it. It's like you with
but they are the
World
Lords of
Eaters.
the Grave. Oh god, yeah, World Eaters and World Bearers. I always get those two mixed up as well. It's terrible.
That's it. Anyway, so what is going on? So yeah, I played down at flipping heck. I played down at in Toyment at a 40k Brawl event with a Dark Angel army. So I took 34 Terminators and the Lion. I was trying to do it before it was cool. To be honest with you, Phil, 34 Terminators is about 10 Terminators more than you need, I'd say.
It sounds a bit like 10 Terminators too many. I would say 20 sounds about the right number.
Yeah, so basically I took the Lion, 2 Terminator Captains, 1 Terminator Ancient, 1 Terminator Strike Master, which is the unique Deathwing Lieutenant, which is about to be removed from the game with the release of the new Dark Angels Codex. I then took 1 unit of 10 Deathwing Knights, 1 unit of 10 Deathwing, and then I took 1 generic unit of Terminators and 1 generic unit of Assault Terminators, and that was the full complement of what I brought to the table. Truthfully, I think the army would have worked a lot better if in place of the Assault Terminators and the regular Terminators, I had taken some Ravenwing units. I think just a couple of bikes, or maybe, to be honest with you, with the way the game is at the moment, infiltrators or something that shuts down the absurdity of the deep strike movement that is ever present in the game at the moment would have been pretty handy. And I will say this as well, playing competitive 40k again for the first time in a little while. So I think the last competitive 40k event I went to prior to this was Hellstorm Wargaming's super awesome event, or whatever they called it. I think that was back in October, maybe November time. So I went there. So I'd had a little bit of hiatus, maybe 2 months to 3 months between tournament attendance. But yeah, God, the game has moved on, Phil. I mean, it is definitely now maturing in terms of what people are bringing, doing. Obviously, we saw that exhibited at the LVO over the weekend as well. Lots of crazy armies with crazy builds and all sorts of things. But yeah, it's definitely interesting how it has changed. I feel like the lack of restrictions is really creating a very interesting situation, because no other Warhammer system operates the way 40k does, in the fact that even Age of Sigmar requires that you take a certain amount of battle line. Now, there is ways that you could tweak that so as certain things become battle line, but like you still have to observe that stipulation, right? Whereas in 40k, it's just like, do whatever you want. You want to take 60 characters that add up to 2,000 points? I don't think you could do that with 60 characters, but you want to take, 25 characters that add up to 2,000 points. Go nuts. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what's odd is the tournament setting doesn't have any kind of comp to it to limit that. It's effectively, so it's like open play, which is normally seen as the most casual option. Obviously, you've got the rule of 3 still. And and you must have one character, right? Like, open play, I guess, could be literally anything, but it's not far from that. And I guess I get the logic behind it. They want people to have the freedom to create the lists that they want, and potentially thematic lists without any kind of restriction of, oh yes, I need 3 lots of intercessors for my Space Marines to be my troop choices. And then I can have my Terminator army. It's like, oh no, you can just have all Terminators if you want. So I do get that, but yeah, it does, I guess, lead to probably some wild builds that people could potentially do. You know, we talked about the all Catan list for Necrons when we reviewed the Necron Codex. Our buddy, I think he's called Pete Builds Stuff on Instagram. He actually messaged me afterwards to say, oh, that's the list he's actually doing, or a very similar one, like all Catans. Not inspired by us, but just coincidentally doing that. And I was like, well, it's a brilliant low model count army, so just for that reason alone, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as someone who took a exclusively Terminator list led by the Lion, you know, I obviously see the value in it in some regards. But it is interesting because the reason why I bring that up, and the thing that I thought was really interesting, is that one of the things that also happened recently is we saw the Legacy, the Legends, the Squarebase podcast, renowned Renegade codexes or army books released for Warhammer the Old World. So I spent a bunch of time reading those codexes. Battle tomes, if you will. I haven't read all of them yet. I was going through like Chaos Demons and Lizardmen specifically, checking out what they can do and how you can kind of build those out. It's just wonderful reading books again or publications where there's so much more like flexibility within those restrictions. You know, like you have to observe certain restrictions, although at the moment it seems that Warhammer the Old World isn't capping the amount of something you can take. So if you wanted to take, you know, an amount of steam tanks, you can, although there is restrictions within percentiles in terms of points and unit types. But if you can, in the points that you're playing, you know, if you've got 500 points and you've got 5 100-point things that you want to take, you can take all 5 of them. So it's not like 40k where they go, you can only have 3 of something. Yes, you can have as many as you want of something. But it's just lovely to be in a situation where armies have like more customization to them, where it's like, this individual model is 17 points. If you want to give it a shield, it's 2 points. If you want to give it a spear, it's 1 point. If you want to give it a drum, it's 10 points. If you want to give it it's...
I love that kind of level of customization because it allows you to kit bash and sort of tailor your model and build it how you want. And it's really inspiring for when you are kind of converting minis. If you're someone that wants to play WYSIWYG, maybe it's not as fun because you're like, oh, well, I've got this loadout. Oh, I feel like I'm inclined to build another model with a different loadout for, especially if you're trying to optimize a metagame and be like, oh, well, in this edition, this is the really efficient thing to take. I want hammers and shield. And then in this one, I want a guy with a great sword or a wizard, or, you know, because you can give your lord a bunch of different loadouts. So I guess that's the downside of it. And, you know, when you're actually list building, you've got maths involved. You've got to, you know, tot it all up. And if there's an app that does it for you, brilliant. That makes it a lot easier. And 40k has really been simplified. And I do lament the lack of points for war gear choices. I like that little finessing that you can do on your list and sort of go, oh, I'm going to save some points here and I'm going to splurge it all on this one thing here if I want to. So, yeah, those things are nice. And it's great to see it back in the Old World as well.
Well, it's weird as well, because obviously we've been playing a bunch of Age of Sigmar, and Age of Sigmar has the same problem, right? Like, Age of Sigmar, in some respects, is sort of worse because, like, there's probably slightly less units. So basically the way you get around it in Age of Sigmar is you chuck in an endless spell, right? Or you just accept the fact that you're going to be 30 points under. But a lot of the time, it's, you know, the deficit is filled by endless spells a lot of the time now.
Well, or yes, but you also get the triumph, right? So the army that's got the least number of points gets a triumph, which is normally like a reroll to your charge roll, I think is the one I often take. I think the other one's like reroll a bravery test or something. I can't quite remember because I just always go for the reroll charge rolls. That seems like the sensible one.
For you, certainly, I'd go reroll bravery.
Yeah, I guess so, because I don't ever need that one in my army currently. Well, for me, it's weird because with Nighthaunt especially, like, there are no like war gear choices in your builds. Every single unit literally just has one weapon. So you've got like the Grimgrass Reapers; they've all got scythes. You've got a bunch of guys with swords and a bunch of guys with gribbly spectral fingers, and that's all they have. It's like you don't get like a multi-part kits with different options in, so that kind of no points difference sort of makes sense for at least that army. Now I know yours is a bit different because you actually get different upgrades that you can have, or different weapon types, and for there to be no points difference in those only really works if both options are viable for different situations. So you go, okay, maybe this is less damage, but it's got longer reach. And then this other thing's got less reach, but does more damage. Or less attacks or something. And you can sort of weigh up the different arguments and pros and cons situationally that they're both suitable and nice. And that just doesn't always work in 40k. And ultimately, most people maths hammer it and go, well, this is the optimal choice to always take in all situations. Why would I bother with the other things? Especially when it's like a las cannon versus a heavy bolter or something like that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's become quite prevalent with like the new Deathwing upgrade kit for the Terminators, right? It's like they go, oh, Deathwing, they can have plasma cannons. And it's like, cool. I'm not going to put a plasma cannon on them because Typhoon missile launchers exist. I'm always going to go for the Typhoon missile launcher. It's like, of course I am. It's obviously the best weapon.
But can you only get one or the other then?
Yeah. So in the well, again, obviously, I haven't read all of the leaks, although I've read a few, but I haven't got into the weeds on the Deathwing unit.
Naughty done.
It's hard to, you can't avoid them, right? Like, I mean, it's literally like if you're in any series of Warhammer groups, they're just everywhere. It's like, it's insane. Like, it's literally like, it's you don't even have to try anymore. You just have to basically be in like 3 different WhatsApp groups and one of them will sort you out with all of it. Anyway, but the point is that, the point is that, yeah, I feel like that's one of the weird things. It's like, oh, what's unique about the Deathwing is they get the plasma cannon. And I'm sort of looking at it going, but I don't want the plasma cannon. Like, why would it's like, that's no good at all. I would want the plasma cannon if it was 5 points and a Typhoon missile launcher was 25 points. Great. Like, sure, why not? It's like, it hits a nice medium. It's like, at the moment, it's like heavy flamer, no thank you. Assault cannon, no. Typhoon missile launcher, yes. But then if it was, you can have an assault cannon or a plasma cannon, might go for the plasma cannon. It's got a little bit more utility, better against like elite units, feels more appropriate for like that kind of thing. But again, it's because there's no points to it. So I'm looking at it going like, oh, great. I get plasma cannons. And I might put plasma cannons on the Terminators just because it's something unique to Deathwing. But really, I'd only be doing that for thematic reasons. I wouldn't for like just points efficiency. It's like, put the Typhoon missile launchers on them for God's sakes. Like, that's the option. That's the one you take. Because it's just so much better than all the other options.
Yeah, that's sort of understandable. And it's I guess it's a sort of a shame that people do that. Like, obviously, and it's hard to resist that when you go, I want to do something because of rule of cool, or because I think thematically it works better for your army. But then when you just know something's not as good as something else, it's really hard to resist the law of, but why not take this better option? Because I can. And at least, as you say, there's normally a points incentive to be like, well, if I don't take it, at least I'm saving points I can spend or do something elsewhere. And, I try to avoid watching anyone talk about that for the old world, because I don't want to know what is the meta unit for stuff in the old world. Because when I do play it, I've just got models that I collected as kids. That's all I'm going to play with. Maybe I'll pick up a couple of things, like the Marauder Giant, which they've announced is coming back, even though it doesn't actually fit in either of my 2 armies I have that would be viable. But it's like, I don't want old world to be something that people are going to, work out what the meta choices are, and just, the internet has decided this is the thing that you need to take. I just want to do what I want and have a nice themed army and try and resist the law of the most optimal builds.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that's actually really good with the old world, right? And by the way, if I've triggered anyone with my weird talk of Typhoon missile launchers, it's actually a Cyclone missile launcher is what it was supposed to call. When did it become a Cyclone missile launcher? Has it always been a Cyclone missile launcher?
I thought so, yeah, but...
Why did I think...
What's the Typhoon? No, Typhoon is something, yeah. Unless you're shooting tea bags at people.
It could be. Isn't that
unless there's...
Typho? No.
Something like that. Yeah,
I don't think that's I don't think is it Typhoon D? I don't think it is.
Maybe it isn't. It's similar enough.
Moving
on.
Typhoon missile.
I think it may be.
Typhoon. It feels very. Maybe that's just like a real word for like a missile. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, Phil, right? Terminators. Just to go back to it, just the last thing, right? Would you either want we'll go with the worst case scenario. Would you either want a weapon that replaces your Stormbolter, gives you a range of 12, has D6 shots, is strength 5, -1 AP, 1 damage, ignores cover and torrent, right? Would you want that? Or would you want your Stormbolter and either a 36-inch range, 2d6, ballistic skill 3 plus strength 4, AP 0, 1 damage gun, or a 3d6 2-shot ballistic skill 3 plus strength 9 -2 d6 damage weapon? It's like literally it's incomparable. It's like, how in God's name did they think that was the way you had to go? It's like, when are you ever taking the heavy flamer?
When you just don't need a Stormbolter.
Yeah, but like you get the Stormbolter, which is almost as good as the heavy flamer.
Yeah.
Plus,
because it would be 4 shots probably, yeah. So it's similar. Yeah, it's a weird one, that. If there was like, you can pick the Cyclone missile launcher plus one of the other heavy weapons in the squad, that would be okay. But yeah, if it's just pick one for the whole squad, that's a bit limited.
Yeah, like don't get me wrong. If they gave us the option to have a Terminator squad with 5 heavy flamers, I'd take that squad. Of course I would. That would be an amazing squad. But, like, that's a very specific squad with a very specific purpose. If you're talking just general...
Yeah, I mean, you could say the heavy flamer's a good choice if you think you're going to deep strike down, attempt to charge that you'll potentially fail, and you just want a counter to being charged so you could overwatch and get some auto hits on. But one flamer isn't particularly scary enough to put people off or to kill enough things to make that suitably viable.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, the Infernus Marine squad hasn't really found its place in the competitive game, although when I look at a lot of, like, NID armies, for example, at the moment, or even, like, things like some of the armies like the Necro armies, for example, there's probably a place for it, because if you could end up in a situation where you could deep strike that thing down and have it in a situation where it could cause a lot of damage to units and then have the overwatch for it, I think that's pretty viable. But yeah, I just think, but maybe if they put that on Terminators, that'd be quite cool. But yeah, anyway, but that's my point, right? Writing armies in 40k is just now, I go on the Warhammer app and I just go, what do I want? Click, 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 click. I don't even look at like options because I'm like, well, who cares? Because it's all the same points. So I'm just
if you know what the options are, yes. I mean that's a quicker way of building lists. Is you just pick the units and, as you say.
But I don't want list building to be quick, Phil. I don't want it. I want it to be an arduous, fun puzzle. Like I find 40k.
I want it to be spreadsheets.
I do. That's what I love. I love going onto Battlescribe and poring over the detail and getting that army to exactly 2,000 points with all the unique gear that I think, and I need to make decisions. I'm like, I want my sergeant to have a melter bomb, but I really also need this guy to have a cherub or whatever it is. So I have to make these choices, you know?
Yes, yeah. Because the downside I find, especially with guard stuff, is like before you go, I take all my infantry as like bare bones, keep them as cheap as possible, and save my points for, I could maybe squeeze in another tank or something.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's like every single guardsman has like a heavy weapons team in there, as many special weapons as you can cram in. The sergeant's got, a bolter or a plasma pistol, because that's probably the best option. Yeah, and you sort of lose the flavour of guardsmen being this bog standard unit when they're literally tooled to the nines. And it just seems a bit much for me. And loads of people are going off and just building those individual minis to add to their squads, because why wouldn't you? It's all free stuff, right? Whereas I just can't be bothered with mine. It's like, I've got a couple of specialist weapons that I'll add to units if I can, but I don't have the best options, because the generic, the old Forge World Krieg, most of them, you go, here's a flamer or a grenade launcher. Trying to actually get the plasma or the melter options required a upgrade pack that cost a bunch of money extra, so it was always a bit more difficult to get hold of those.
Yeah, and I think that's it though, right? Like, I think it's weird. It the weirdness feels less weird in Age of Sigmar just because the units are kind of built the way they're built, right? You buy a box of Liberators or you buy a box of, whatever, insert whatever unit, buy a box of Brutes. They come with the stuff that you can give it, and that's really the end of it, right? Like, they've not had these years of iteration where, this stuff
40k especially has always tried to sort of do multi-build kits, so you buy a box, but really it's two things that it could be. You get to pick which one you build, and that's why you kind of get the war gear choices of you're going to have this weapon or this weapon. Even when the Primaris first came out, you got 3 different types of bolt weapons, which seemed a bit much. You kind of got used to it after a while, and now it's just like that's just a one thing. It doesn't matter.
But I do think this is the thing, though. I think it does sort of, for me anyway, that's one of the weird things about 40k that's kind of been robbed for me. So, like, for example, I was mucking around with lists for RFW recently because I was like, well, I've got to come up with a list for RFW. RFW presents an interesting challenge because it's 1750 points rather than 2,000 points. And the aspiration is that you're trying to build something that's not just, like, overly tooled up necessarily, but the idea is to have, bring fun, interesting lists. So I'm going through it and all the rest of it. But again, like, I remember older RFW events or older events in the general sense where I'd spend a lot of time on my list and I'd refine it and work on it and tweak it and play games with it and go, this particular upgrade isn't quite what I need it to be. What if I do this? What if I take this squad and turn it into 2 5-man squads? What if I, like, blah, 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 blah. We iterate and iterate. Whereas with like at the minute, I just sort of just go blap, 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 blap. In goes all the stuff. And then I just sort of see where it sort of nets out to. And then I'm like, yeah, close enough. And then it sort of works out. So, like, for example, I wrote my list, which I'm considering taking to RFW, which is a bunch of basically it's my old Hammer Craft World army, which is every Phoenix Lord with a squad of their aspect warriors. So essentially, for 1750 points, I can get every Phoenix Lord. I can get a Farseer. I can get a Warlock. I can get a Guardian squad. I can get one of every aspect warrior that goes with the Phoenix Lords. I can get a Warlock Conclave to go with my Farseer. I can get a Falcon. And I can get a unit of Harlequins with a Shadow Seer, right? So I put all this in, and I just look at it, I'm just like, flipping heck. There's so much stuff. I've literally got 6 legendary characters, a wizard. Well, I've got 4 wizards. In fact, no, I've got 5 wizards because there's the Harlequin wizard, and then I've got 8 units. So one of every aspect that was there. So Striking Scorpions, Dire Avengers, Howling Banshees, Swooping Hawks, if I haven't said that already, Dark Reapers, I don't think I said that already, Fire Dragons, right? Then I've got a Falcon, so a tank, and a unit of 10 Guardians, and a couple of extra little wizards to go with my big wizard. And I was looking at this and I was just thinking, good Lord, this game is mad. It's like, literally, like in other editions, if I took just the 6 Phoenix Lords would have been like 1,500 points. You know, like in older editions, they were like 200 points a model.
Maybe they're just not seen as good anymore, so they've been pointed less. But I think the points have slowly creeped up over the years in terms of how much you can fit in your army. And so I played those 2 games on Sunday on the standard size board for 1,000 points, and it's like get a lot of models kind of crammed into that table. Especially on my opponent's army, I had 40 odd models probably. Of Tower Warriors, broadsides, a couple of elite stuff, a couple of units of crew and stuff. It filled his deployment zone when he was in there. And then obviously I had it's like 10 guys or something, not that many. But it's like the table sizes are just far too small. It's like I could get a turn 1 charge off quite comfortably both times. Admittedly, that was using the Blade Champion, who's got a once per game ability where he can advance and charge, and he can also re-roll the advance rolls and the charge rolls. So it's quite guaranteed unless you really sat back from your deployment zone. And I do quite terrain dense tables as well with the stuff that I've got. So yeah, but even so, it just feels like back in 6th and 7th edition, that was literally impossible. Everyone was 24 inches apart. It was impossible to, make those kind of charges. And
it wasn't
I think
impossible.
The game was, but I feel like the game was designed to pretty much make it impossible. Like, technically you could, but there was almost nothing that could actually do it. I think Knights became one of the few things that could when they came out, but prior to that, I don't think it was. I mean, maybe there was the odd thing here and there that could.
Yeah, they made it that Space Wolves, when they did the 7th edition Space Wolf book, had turn 1 charge options.
Okay.
And then they also added a bunch of...
The game wasn't designed for that.
No, like they added a detachment of Raven Guard that could do it. So you could take a bunch of assault squads and scout squads, and then through a combination of weirdly detachment stuff, you could have a turn 1 charge. And then obviously they did the infamous Skyhammer detachment, that gave you turn 1 charges. So they did a lot of jank in end of 7th edition. I mean, one thing I was going to say, actually, one of the things that was actually really cool about looking at the list building process in Old World is it did make me go back and look at some of the old codexes that I have in my library, as it were. And it reminded me, man, when I was reading them, I was like, oh, this feels a lot like the kind of, it felt a lot like the 8th edition fantasy codexes, or battle tomes for fantasy, which are really cool. But then also those had a lot in common with the 6th edition Warhammer 40,000 codexes, which I actually, upon re-reviewing, kind of feel like are really underrated in terms of what they were offering players in terms of build. Like, there was so much interesting stuff you could do with those armies back then, because they had all this really interesting layering of war gear and abilities, but they also had interesting gimmicks that created weird pros and cons. So Chaos Space Marines had the special rule of Champions of Chaos, where they had to issue challenges regardless. So it was literally even if it was always hilarious, wasn't it? Everyone always looked at the worst case scenario, which is so my aspiring champion, or whatever it was, my squad sergeant is in a fight with, I don't know, Gazkol Fracker, some massive character. And it's I challenge you. And it's just well, probably not going to go too well, is it? But it's very
well, to be fair, I was, as a guardsman, always on the receiving end, where my lonely watchmaster was being challenged by this, chaos sergeant of some kind, and I was like, yes, okay, I'll accept, or I'll hide, and he'll still be murdered anyway, because they just eat through the squads. I never really liked the challenge mechanics, because it never favoured my armies, and I never really saw the point of it, because you couldn't go, this one guy will take the challenge and tank all of his attacks, because actually, if the attacks killed him, the remaining attacks still killed the other members of the squad anyway, so there was no real benefit to be the defender of the challenge. Unless it only really worked if you had 2 great heroic characters and you just want them to have a showdown, then it sort of makes sense.
Yeah, I think that was the fatal flaw of the challenge system in 6th edition, and then subsequently 7th edition, which was the idea of unit characters, like, because it was. I think at the time the terminology was like leaders or commanders and sub-commanders. There was some specific terminology that differentiated an independent character from a character or something. Maybe that was just it. Because back then they used to have the Lookout Sir rule, but the Lookout Sir rule in that edition was as you rolled a Lookout Sir test. And it was always like, roll the Lookout Sir test. Oh, someone else has thrown themselves onto the thing, rather than the actual character.
Yes, yeah, they would basically bite the bullet as a bodyguard for your character, wouldn't they?
And if it was a sergeant, it was a 4+, but if it was an independent character, it was a 2+, wasn't it? And that was like the main difference. So it made it harder to pick out the ICs than it did to get the regular characters. But anyway, but I just enjoyed the flavour of it, man. I just enjoy, and that is like, I think like it's just something I'd love to see us get back in 40k at some point. I didn't really add that to my predictions for 40k when we were talking about 2024 stuff, but I'd actually really, if I had an ask, can we just get back to just doing like, it's like, can we do old points again, please? Can we stop doing this silly?
Yeah, but here's the thing: that's more like a wish. As a prediction, that isn't going to happen this year.
No, never. It won't.
It might happen in what was it, 11th edition now? Right, so it'll happen eventually. Or I feel like for it to happen, this is my assumption, is that the app is the thing that's restricting why that is the case. Because the app has never been, it's okay now. But it's always had such a troubled history, and it feels like that potentially is the limiting factor for why they don't want to use points, because it would really complicate the army builder. Now, that might be a bit unfair because they obviously had points in the previous version, and we don't quite know. And they might have genuinely thought, we just want this game to be more accessible, and actually we think taking those things out will be more beneficial to the game. But I can't say I've met many people that have really loved it as a change, because it effectively is power level in all but name is what they've turned points into. And a lot of casual people, I don't want to say I was an advocate for it, but I did like it. I like the concept of it, but I also like the idea of points as well. Like giving people the choice to do power level versus points, great for those that want it, but now they're like, well, you just have to do it.
It's interesting for sure. But it's one of the nice things about the old world is that, and Horus Heresy, to its credit as well. Horus Heresy is an interesting one in and of itself, because I think the things with Horus Heresy is that, like, a lot of the tricks and nuances of that come from, fantasy, I suppose, is more interesting because there's like all these interesting upgrades and additions that you make to units, so you give them like specific buffs. And that's one of the reasons why I actually really enjoyed like the old 6th edition builds, because they always had interesting gimmicks around like the armies where they needed to pay to access abilities or whatever, but then there was like random generation. And although I know a lot of people don't like that about that edition, where you had to like go, I am using telepathy. Oh, what spells of telepathy have you got? Hang on. These ones. And it's always like, very interesting system.
I think that's much more narrative. But I don't think that's very suitable for tournament play, because it sort of adds in a relevant element of randomness, where it's like, I've built my army to do this one thing around this one spell, but I've only got a 1 in 6 chance of rolling for it. So if I don't get it, I've just lost the game because I was relying on that gimmick. And it's like, well, you weren't meant to rely on it in the first place.
But I think that's the genius of it as a system, though, because it stops you relying on those gimmicks. You have to build like around
more
other
all-rounder
things.
lists, or lists that won't lean into a particular janky spell that you might just happen to roll for.
Well, that was the thing when running like Chaos Demons in 6th edition, I would prioritize certain upgrades based on the notion that I wanted like certain things, but at the same time, I was quite content with getting what they call like the Primaris powers back then, or the
because there was like the default like the one on the table was the one that you could always pick if you didn't like any of the others.
Yeah.
So that is true. There was like a backup option, which I think.
Yeah. Well, it was always amazing with the demons because you had different levels of rewards. So you had lesser rewards, greater rewards, and exalted rewards. And depending on what god you were worshipping, there were different rewards at different levels for different things. But then there were always like defaults. So like if you were Zinch and you wanted to go lesser rewards, you'd roll for it. And if you weren't happy with what it was, you go, oh, I guess I'm just taking the Staff of Change. And the Staff of Change was cool because it was basically a really, really painful stick that would explode your enemies. And you're like, yeah,
wouldn't it turn them into would it turn them into a chaos spawn?
Oh no! So that was the greater reward that would give you the Sword of Change. I think it was Staff of Change.
Okay.
It might have been like the Sword of Spawns or something, and that would turn characters or things into spawns. Which is hilarious. I can never remember what the Exalted one was. I think it was like some... Anyway, but the point is it was really funny and you could add in some interesting layers. But I'm enjoying that with Old World. I was able to get a box, Phil. I got a box of Skellies.
Ooh, you got your Tomb Kings. Well done.
I got my box of Skellies. So,
did you get your box of Deathwing?
I've reserved that. Yes, that has been ordered. I haven't got it yet, obviously, because it's not available yet. But I have.
Oh
got
yeah, of course.
yet.
It just went on pre-order, though, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. To be fair as well, the box of Skellies I don't have in my possession yet either because Games Workshop did a ridiculously bad job of delivering the Old World to independent retailers, which is fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean,
a real shame. And
likewise, talk about that for. Sorry, Phil. No, I was just going to say because it is wild. Like literally, it turns out. Yeah, Games Workshop basically, it's just mad to think in a release of the scale of the Old World that you'd let down like so many retailers like that. It's so ridiculous, man. Like literally, so I ordered from Entoyment and I was there and I was chatting to the owner and it's like, oh, so where's all the stock? And he's like, we ain't got it. He's like, do you know when you're getting it? And he's like, no, it'll arrive when it arrives. And it's like, wow, that's wild. Like it's such a big release, you know?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, there's essentially two options. Is one, there's just really limited sort of stock in general because there kind of is with all of these releases. And two, because it is a specialist game, it's probably got less priority than like a 40k release. So, you know, let's hope they probably got more copies of like the Deathwing Knights than they did of the Old World because maybe they just completely underestimated how popular the Old World was going to be. What was interesting is because obviously they released their, was it quarterly statement? I can't remember. One of their, shareholders' statements, and in it they talk about, I think that they've got 3 factories at the moment, but they kind of know they're at capacity and they're planning on building a 4th one. So I think they're at least aware that there's a problem with sort of stock and the inability to manufacture enough to sort of supply all the demands that they've got for all the products. It's also sort of just mad that in general, like the amount of releases that they've put out this year, like the amount of game they've done 2 new brand new game systems in the space of a couple of months with Legions Imperialis and the Old World. That seems really puzzling because normally specialist games do 1 a year, and they instead just gave us 2, which I don't know. It feels like you're just harming yourself because a lot of people will go, "Oh, I can only buy 1." Whereas if you staggered it,
because it kind of got crunched. It got crunched together because of delays, didn't it?
Yeah. So Legions Imperialis, I think, was meant to come out a bit earlier in the year, and it got delayed by a few months, but not by a huge amount. Whereas, so the Old World, if I was to have originally hazarded a guess, I would have said, well, of course it will come out in November because that's when the specialist games always come out. So it's mad that it came out in January. That just seems wildly, like just a weird time of year to release a whole new standalone game. My only guess is that they've basically said, yeah, but we're doing 4th edition Age of Sigmar in September, and we don't want people not buying into that because they're going
to... You mean June? It's coming in June, mate.
Oh, right, yeah. Sorry, yeah. It was always a bit sooner, and I always get my guess is messed up in terms of when it comes out. I always think, it's September because it's sort of middle of the year, but actually September isn't the middle of the year. So you're right. And maybe they've gone, well, we don't want it to interfere with Age of Sigmar, so you can't release it in November because people might hold out for that. So just do it now and get it out of the way. Maybe. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure they've got more sound reason than that, but that's my guess.
Yeah, it's a fair guess. But yeah, so yeah. Anyway, yeah, so I got my box of Skellies, which is just cool. Didn't bother trying to get the end and the death part 3, but that was a whole saga, it seemed.
Yes, although they've done a good job. So it basically sold out immediately. Loads of scalpers got not boxes, books worth multiple copies, and we're putting them on eBay for like 200 to 300 quid when it costs, I don't know, 60 quid or something. I'm not. Yeah. I don't know how much it would be. Anyway, it sounds like Games Workshop have worked out who has bought multiple copies. I guess because you'll be like, well, there's these 8 copies from 8 different accounts all going to the same address. So we'll let them have 1 copy and then we refund them for the other 7. And now I think they said they had between 400 and 500 copies that they were putting on resale this week. So that's good that people can hopefully complete their collections, because it was quite sad seeing lots of people go, here's my complete collection of the really expensive limited edition books, and I'm missing the very last one in the set. God, that would be, quite galling. So, yeah, it seems like Games Workshop have done a really good thing with that, and they've also instigated some sort of anti-bot protection, which hopefully will stand the test of time and not be immediately circumvented by whoever these people are.
Yeah, we have to type in the letters now to get on, which fair enough, right? And I think that's the thing. I think it's amazing though that we lived long enough to see it happen, Phil. The end of the Heresy novel series. It's wild. I know you're only just starting on the journey, but
quite.
You're that guy who waits to the end. He doesn't want to have to.
Exactly. I don't want to have to wait around. I'm not. George R.R. Martining this stuff. I'm just gonna blitz through. Yeah, I'm actually on book 10 at the moment, which is
wow.
I can't remember what it's called. It's like the anthology. Oh, hold on, I've got it here. It's the anthology.
What the Primarchs?
No, sorry. It's just called Tales of Heresy.
Oh yes,
which is a compilation of short stories. The first one being like Custodes' Blood Games, which was quite interesting. Where they're infiltrating the palace to see if they can effectively assassinate the emperor or not, and how good their security systems are. So that was a really good one. Yeah, the one before, which I effectively just finished, was Mechanicum, which is pretty good. A little bit confusing at times, but I quite liked the overall themes and what they were going with. So that was interesting. So it's all good so far. Still got another 50 odd to go.
Well, I'm all up to date. I need to get on Audible and get End of the Death Part 3 when that becomes available. I think I don't know if it's on Audible yet or not. I should check, but I'll get that downloaded and get listening. Yeah,
I guess it would be if they've. Depends if people have actually got the copies of the actual End of Death book. I would have thought so.
The book's out there, yeah. Like I've already had it all spoiled.
No,
but I don't mind spoilers. Like I'm weird. I don't care. Spoilers actually get me more excited about stuff because I'm like, I will actually pay attention to that. Like I'm weird. I actually seek out and enjoy spoilers. I'd rather just know and then I'll get around to it. You know.
I tend to disagree.
No, of course, I understand it's an odd thing.
Here's the thing. I think when it comes to 40k, in a way, spoilers is just lore. So why wouldn't you want to learn it? But then when you contextualize it around the concept of a book with interesting, plot twists, that's the bit that's a spoiler that I wouldn't want to hear. But then sometimes did you know? Here's a fun fact. That isn't necessarily a spoiler, but maybe people just don't want to know it because they want to go in completely blind and be like, because I would be like with End of Death, don't tell me anything, haven't heard anything, have deliberately avoided learning or reading anything from the people that are telling it. So when, if I can manage to do that for about a year, that'd be great. So by the time I do get around to listening to it, I can be fresh. So
Yeah, the end of the Death books. I mean, book 1 was strong. I think again started a bit weak, but got better as it went along. I think Saturnine, which was the Aaron Densky Bowden book before End of the Death, I think that's the way it went. Or maybe it was I can't remember now. Hang on, let me just check. Siege of Terror. Siege of Terror. Was it Lost? The Lost and the Damned, I think, actually. Books. Yes. So. Yeah. So. Okay. Yeah. So. First Wall, Lost and the Damned, Fury of Magnus, Mortis, Warhawk. Oh, that was it, yeah. So Echoes of Eternity, Garrow the Night of the Grey. Okay, fine. So there's Garrows, Echoes of Eternity, Saturnine. So a bunch of different books within the overall running order of things. But the point is that, like, basically, like, I felt like the first of the End of the Death books was a bit like, whatever at first, but then turned into an amazing thing, built up really nicely. End of the Death 2 started a bit weird and then ended quite interestingly. Create some interesting like twists throughout, and then so excited to see.
I think that is a summary of pretty much all of except probably bar one of the Horus Heresy books that I've read so far. It starts off a bit weird, has some interesting twists and turns, and then builds up to like a great crescendo at the end. With the exception of Battle for the Abyss, which is the one that everyone's poo-pooed in terms of reviews, and I sort of understand. It's like an action story. So there's not really much talking. All the characters are real, just like stereotypes of their chapters or legions. And if it was like a TV show or a movie, it would be fantastic because it's just set piece after set piece. It's like battles throughout. But yeah, as a story, it's a bit more difficult to get behind because I kind of find it really hard to concentrate on just action scenes when I'm listening to audiobooks. Maybe it's slightly different if you're reading it. But yeah, I much prefer just dialogue and people talking, and I can kind of engage with that a bit easier. Yeah. Whereas, my brain starts drifting off to other things when it's just action scenes on its own. And a whole story of just action scenes is, struggles somewhat.
No, that's fair. That's fair. But yeah, no, it's been good. It's been good. Amazing that it's over. Again, out of respect to out of respect to you, Phil, and our listeners, I won't get into the spoiler territory with it. But
thank you very much. Thank you.
But obviously, yeah, it's really interesting that ultimately they're sticking to the key beats, as it were, and that they're delivering really interesting layers within that. I think that's the cool thing with it. It's like, I personally would have loved it for them to have really twisted it. I would have loved them to do something mad with it. And again, I won't say whether they do or don't, as it were, although obviously they don't because I'm saying it. But like, yeah, I would like to have done something mad with it, but I understand why they can't, right? They can't have Sanguinius become evil because it would off. But I think they should have probably done it. You know, I still think that's the right call.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the end of the podcast, Phil, I reckon.
I believe so.
There we go. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening to episode 172. You've been delightful. I've been Dan. He's been Phil. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
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 I found these